We are very glad that you're able to join us, and we know there are about 287 of you watching to hear an overview of the reopening plans for the Elwood School District. I would like to thank the members of the administrative team for joining me tonight, and each of them will give a presentation of some of the items directly under their purview. And I would also like to thank the members of the Board of Education, who I know are among those viewing from home, not only for joining us, but also for their support, guidance, and direction throughout the process. This has truly been a labor of love. We are very anxious to have our students, faculty, and staff back in the school buildings. While instruction has not ceased, it is certainly different in a virtual environment. So we want to do everything possible to have our students return to school, but to do so in a very safe way. It was only about 2 weeks ago that we received the guidance document that is placed on the website from the New York State Education Department. That is a 164-page document that speaks in very specific terms about the requirements to reopen schools safely during COVID-19. We will give you the Elwood response to all of those items tonight in our 110 slides that we have prepared to speak to those questions. That guidance came in conjunction with a 24-page document from the New York State Department of Health. And that one was solely focused on health and safety, but it also contained several key elements that we must adhere to in order to implement a plan. So that, along with CDC guidance, guidance from the American Academy of Pediatrics, guidance from the Suffolk County Health Department, all had to be reviewed, calculated, studied, understood, comprehended to develop a plan that we feel is comprehensive in nature and can return our students to our buildings safely. So before I share my screen and start going through the presentation, I want to share a few things. We have made questions available tonight, much the way we have done for our virtual board meetings by creating a meeting-specific address. It's simply reopening at elwood.k12.ny.us. I know that some of you have already used that. Mrs. Marks, our district clerk and my assistant, has already started to calculate or collect those questions so that they can be answered at the end of the program. We're hopeful that the slides will answer many of them. The slides are comprehensive in nature, so we're hoping that most of the questions you pose will be answered, but Mrs. Marks will filter through each question that was submitted, and any question we did not speak to about the general nature of our plan, she will pose at the end so that the administration can respond. And any question that's about an individual student or an individual concern, she will forward to me so that we can respond privately tomorrow. That email address will remain open and active, and we will monitor it until our schools are reopened in September, and we'll start going back to our very typical communication procedures. I would also like to, and it's in the document, but I would like to thank the 115 members of the reopening task force. Our task force was comprised of 4 subcommittees: health and safety, which we called COVID-19 accommodations, facilities, which speak to the condition of the buildings and a lot of our cleaning procedures, transportation and food service, with Mr. Tranquino and Mrs. Pugh co-chaired for us. And then, of course, really curriculum instruction, labeled distance learning, which Dr. Hull took us through, and Mrs. Dunkel was facilities. So I thank all of them for chairing the committees, and I thank all of you for participating in them. The perspective, the viewpoint, the lens in which you brought to the table to help us to evaluate, each scenario was extremely valuable. If you listen to the governor's comments today, and he talked about the reopening of school plans as his team has begun to review them, he talked about how important it is that parents are part of the process. So I hope that those who represented each of our stakeholder groups feels like they were part of the process, feels they were heard, and feels that their perspective became part of our plan. And I think you'll see you did. The other part of the plan to really understand from the onset is that it's fluid in nature. The very cover slide of the document says this plan is subject to change based upon new information, feedback, ideas from stakeholders. As I indicated in today's letter, no idea is off the table. We want to make sure we ensure the safety of our students, our faculty, and staff, and have a program of excellence that all the residents of Elwood can be proud of. So with that, I will begin sharing my screen so we can go through the slides. Forgive me because there's typically a bit of a delay. Just fine. Your face is right below mine that I can see. Do you see the slides? Thumbs up. Thank you. Okay. So again, this plan is one of two documents that was submitted to both the State Education Department in the NYSED portal and also the New York State Department of Health. This plan has to go through two levels of approval before we can reopen our schools. The governor has made it very, very clear that the final decision is his, and he's given some criteria of which he will make that decision, which I will share with you. But it is clear that the governor wants to have the unilateral authority to direct schools to be open or closed come the fall. In addition, the State Education Department has a portal with nearly 40 assurances that I needed to sign off to indicate with my certification, license, and career on the line that our plan includes the components as required by the 164-page document. It's a little different. Typically, plans that are submitted to State Education Department, like our academic intervention plan, our professional development plan, those are plans that are typically developed by the administration and then approved by the Board of Education. The reopening plan was very different. It was very clear that the state wanted to hold superintendents accountable for the contents of the plan, so that if there was any failure to meet the requirements of the plan, there would be, one person to point to. So if you have any doubts about my concern to make sure that our plan is comprehensive and focuses on safety, keep in mind that my very license and certification was placed on the table when I clicked all of the insurances. So again, at the bottom it says the plan will likely change, but this is the most updated version, which was presented also to our faculty and staff earlier today. So it has an introductory page which talks about some of the reasons why we find ourselves in this position to have to create this plan. And it speaks to the governor's directive that if at any time the infection rate reaches 5% before we reopen, and in Suffolk County right now it's 1%, thankfully, on the decline, we would not be able to open. And that if at any time while we are open, the infection rate in our region goes above 9% on a 7-day average, we would be forced to close schools at the direction of the governor. I venture a guess that if the infection rate in Suffolk County increases from 1% to 9%, we won't have to worry about closing any of our school buildings because our parents will stop sending their children with the infection rate climbing so rapidly. So let's hope we never get there. Every plan needed to include a method for live instruction, a method for hybrid instruction, and a 100% remote instruction. We'll take you through that for each of our buildings. This speaks to some of the resources that I mentioned. Everything is available on district website. Every resource we were sent, every resource we used, we placed on the reopening portion of our website. As I indicated in today's 4-page letter, that site will look different tomorrow. It will have this slide presentation for some of you that like to take notes and have all the information or are using screen cap. The entire presentation will be posted tomorrow morning and you can dissect it at your leisure, along with the 52-page narrative document that was submitted along with it. Everything that we created and sent to the state and a revised page of our website will be revealed tomorrow, because it will be much easier to navigate from each section of the document once we've posted it on the website. As it indicates here, the district was required to identify a person to serve as the COVID-19 coordinator, that is me, and the COVID contact at each building is the building principal, which makes sense. And all information regarding our opening is on the district website, or will be tomorrow morning. These are the 115 members of the task force committee, and thank you to the parents, the community members, the faculty and staff members, the members of the medical community who really went out of their way to make sure that we had the right perspectives, were asking the right questions, and had the right ideas to put in line to best meet the needs of our district. And I say that because every district's plan will be unique. While we are seeking as much regional consistency as possible, I can assure you, as I indicated in today's letter, every plan will be somewhat different. As I interact daily with the regional superintendents and superintendents from around the state, I can tell you that everyone's resources are different. Everyone's staffing is a bit different. Everyone's buildings are a bit different. So the plan to bring students back safely became very unique to each district. And while there is some regional consistency, there is certainly not regional uniformity. So we had guiding principles to think about and guide all of our work. And the first bullet is the one that really was kept in mind at all times. We must maintain the safety, health, and welfare of all of our students, faculty, and staff. So there will be special accommodations for some of our students who are medically fragile. There will be special accommodations for students with special needs. And there will be the same accommodations for faculty and staff members who also have medical conditions or pre-existing conditions that will require us to make the appropriate accommodations for them to return to work. We want our students and faculty in the buildings to the greatest extent possible. We realize the importance of socialization. We realize the importance of human interaction that can't be fully achieved in this forum. We want to make sure there's an ease of transition between our live and virtual instructional platforms, because we know that there will be times during the year that we will definitively be in a virtual platform 100% of the time for some students. We will have direct guidance from the Department of Health, but if there are occasions when there are positive COVID tests within our school population, whether it's a student, a staff member, or a teacher, we have to respond with isolation and 14 days outside of the school building. So during that time, instruction can't stop. It needs to transition to a virtual environment. So this plan gives us the methodology to transition in and out of the buildings fluidly. We need to maintain the standard of excellence that we strive for every day in our live instruction in our virtual platform. We received a good amount of feedback regarding the platform in the spring. Some things became clear. So we needed to revise our plan to make sure that we took the community's input to make changes to our plan. We listened to our educators on the best way to do it. And our stakeholder committee came together with recommendations for our virtual instruction that I think will be very well received by our students in the community. Set schedules, daily opportunities for live interaction with teachers and our staff members, greater resources on an electronic basis to support our curriculum. We'll take you through that in a few slides. We need to be able to modify the plan as necessary, and we spoke to that. And we need to make sure there is educational equity. We need to make sure that a student's experience doesn't differ based upon the resources available in the household. So we've made some changes to the resources we have and can share with our students to ensure equity. This is a navigation bar as well as a table of contents. This is each of the areas that we were required to touch upon in order to have a comprehensive and complete plan. I'm not a big fan of the order because it doesn't necessarily list in priority where we think. If it did, social and emotional well-being would probably be right below health and safety, but this is the order in which we were prescribed to create our document for the state. And when this is on the website tomorrow, you'll be able to navigate to each section easily by clicking the links. So the first is health and safety. And for those of you that served on the COVID-19 Accommodations Committee with me, you know that we spent a good deal of time working on this area. And this area really serves as an umbrella to everything that we have planned for our return in the fall. So health checks for students will be an important part of our program. For both students and staff, which we'll speak about in a moment, it's important that only healthy people are coming to the building. However, we also understand that not everyone knows about the symptoms and warning signs of COVID-19 and may need to be directed more closely in what to look for. So that is part of the plan. But on a very overview, comprehensive basis, we need to make sure that everyone has protective barriers in place, PPE. So one of the things that is essential to the Elwood plan is it is a 100% of the time mask wearing plan. When we speak to the medical community, and several of them served on our task force, the one thing that they could not stress strongly enough is the greatest preventative measure that we can take as both a school community and as a global community is the wearing of masks. So all faculty and staff will be required to wear masks all the time, as will our students. Clearly, there are some medical exceptions, and we will work with those families whose children have medical exceptions, as we will do for our staff, and there are alternative measures in place that we can use. But we are expecting and will have 100% compliance with mask wearing. To fast forward, yes, we will need to take mask breaks during the day. We will need to create areas that are safe for masks to be removed, and we will make sure that those accommodations are made in the classroom. We also understand how difficult compliance will be the younger our students are. So we need to do some training with our children and you as parents in order to build mask wearing endurance and stamina. It's becoming part of staying healthy in our community. So it's something that we will need to do. It's something we hope you're doing with your children over the summer, encouraging them to wear masks whenever they're outside of the home and encouraging them to try to increase the duration in which they are wearing those masks. But any student that has a temperature of more than 100.0 degrees simply will not be able to participate in school the day they have that temperature. We will be screening temperatures as students enter the building. We have purchased 48 devices to help us assist with that. Some are the iPad-looking devices that you've seen, where it's a no-contact temperature reader, where the student simply places their face and the temperature reader turns green or red based upon the temperature limit that we set at 100.0 in this case. And that will be an easy way. We purchased 2 for building for students to line up socially distant and enter the building passing the iPad. Obviously, knowing that the greater volume of students we have entering at the same time will need more than that. Those devices were very expensive. They're about $3,000 each. So we also supplemented with 40 additional handheld, no-touch temporal thermometers, which we have learned are very, very accurate to supplement our temperature taking routines. And every child who registers a temperature will be brought to an isolation room where we are engaging and contracting with additional medical professionals through an agency so that a qualified person is able to assess their symptoms, take a second reading of a temperature, and make calls to parents along with our nurses in our health office should the child need to be picked up from school. So we are trying to limit any exposure to a child with a fever before they report to a classroom. Some of that temperature check will take place outside of the building on days that permits. A lot of questions have come up about putting tents and things up outside our school buildings. Unfortunately, that is prohibited by the New York State Education Department. You can't have temporary structures. So they're very restrictive about those types of coverings. Every Sunday, you're going to receive an email, parents, that will ask you to sign off on assurances. It's a COVID questionnaire where you will attest to the fact that your child has not had symptoms of COVID-19, has not been exposed to anyone who has tested positive COVID-19, is not awaiting the results of a COVID-19 test, is not running a fever, and that means without 3 days without any type of fever-reducing medication, and other assurances that you haven't traveled to any of the restrictive states. I'm sure you're accustomed to seeing these questionnaires by now if you've had medical appointments and things of that nature. But every Sunday, you'll have to attest to the fact that your child doesn't meet any of those conditions. The last item you'll attest to is that if any of those conditions change during the week, you will keep your child home and notify the school immediately. We don't think it's fair to you to send a daily assurance, as our faculty and staff will receive. But as parents, we're going to ask you to complete it on Sunday night or Monday morning before your child returns to the building, and it will be considered valid for the week unless you contact us to let us know there's a change. Even with that, daily temperature checks will take place at each building each day. And if your child is exhibiting any form of illness, we ask you to keep them home and contact the school. And a student at home can participate in remote instruction so that if you're concerned about symptoms and you're really not sure, you can contact the school and distance learning can take place. If there are symptoms, we'll need you to have your child cleared by a medical professional. If a medical professional is not available to you, according to the state guidance, your child must remain in isolation for 10 days 14 days of quarantine if there has been a positive exposure to COVID-19. So we really ask you to team up with your physician, your pediatrician, anytime you have a concern about your child's health, because those clear to return to school notes that your pediatrician can help you to prepare will be helpful in their more expeditious return to school. Without clearance from a medical professional, we have to be super cautious about who returns to the building with either a 10-day isolation period or a 14-day quarantine/isolation period. The same will be happening for staff. The parents need to understand that for every careful restriction we're placing on our students, there's even more so for faculty and staff. As we know, adults are more apt to be transmitters of COVID-19 virus. So for every assurance that we have for parents to speak about their students, the staff has to speak for themselves. So every day at 6 a.m., they will receive a COVID assurance document, a questionnaire, where they have to attest that none of those risk factors apply to them, including running a temperature. So every day, every faculty and staff member will complete that before reporting to the buildings. The same will go forward with anyone who visits the buildings, and we'll talk about visitors in a bit because we have severely restrict them. But anytime a staff member has to check yes to one of those boxes, they may not report to work. We will work in partnership with the Department of Health anytime we learn of a positive COVID result or a COVID exposure. This Thursday, I've been fortunate to be partnering with our friends at the Department of Health, Dr. Gregson Pickett, who happens to be an Elwood resident. Children are alumni of John Glenn High School, is the physician who helps lead the Department of Health for Suffolk County. He's been a great partner with his team, and they are developing an FAQ, a frequently asked question document for school districts about every scenario we can think of over the last few weeks. What happens if a student tests positive? What happens if the teacher tests positive? What happens if the spouse of a teacher has tested positive? What if it's the building custodian? What if it's the building principal? We want to have a play-by-play book before the school year begins because we anticipate there will be positive COVID testing within our community. We are not immune to this virus. So we want to have a response plan in place before the year begins. And when we have that FAQ document from the Department of Health, it will be posted to the website immediately and shared with parents. We want you to know what our plans are when we have these exposures. We have a good sense of what our actions will be from the CDC, but we want to make sure that we're regionally taking action similar from district to district. So we've asked to partner with the Suffolk County Department of Health to analyze that document and put together very specific scenarios for the school districts of Suffolk County. And they've been very helpful in doing so. Social distancing, as you know, is a key element of keeping people safe and healthy. So we're using the guidance from the state of New York to keep 6 feet whenever possible, but we will not ever aspire to go under the 3 feet recommended by the American Academy of Pediatrics. There is some discrepancy in the medical community regarding children and what appropriate social distancing is. The American Academy of Pediatrics says 3 feet. The state of New York says 6 feet whenever possible. So we went with 6 feet whenever possible with accommodations in some environments to promote learning, but certainly staying above the 3 feet. The key detail to that state document, and you may have seen some of my intended sarcasm on Twitter about what slash means, because in the guidance document from the state, it said 6 feet slash barriers, which has been now legally determined to mean or. So in every area of our plan, when we are having less than 6 feet of distance, more than 3, there will be 2 barriers in place. The mask serves as a barrier, that's one, and that's the most important one. And everywhere else where students are in a seated position, there will be, think of, and I hate using this term, but think of sneeze guards at each individual desk, teacher stations, greeter stations, security stations. There will be a barrier, and I don't want to call it plexiglass because it's made of a composite that's much safer than plexiglass should there be any type of emergency in the building. It's also more easy to clean to keep virus free. And it's also as translucent as possible so it doesn't interfere with the educational process. So you'll see some mock-ups we have but we did purchase an additional barrier for every student in the district, K-12, and every teacher. We will use posters, we will use floor markings, we will use verbal cues and reminders to maintain social distancing as much as possible. And we will have staff and faculty reinforcing the importance of social distancing, both in the classroom and outside of it. PPE will be a must, and forgive me if some of these things are redundant, but it's because they are important. So face coverings at all times. We ask parents to send students to school with masks, although homemade cloth coverings and bandanas have been deemed to be acceptable. The ideal is a mask. For those of you struggling to find the ones you like, we know that our PTA is holding a fundraiser shortly. Well, you'll be able to order some Elwood Spirit masks. So plug for the PTA, and certainly an option if you haven't found a mask that you're comfortable with as yet. We will have mask breaks built up into the day. In special circumstances, and a lot of these were the questions I received from parents, we have students who are hearing impaired who require to read lips in order to communicate with their teachers. We will make accommodations for that using face shields and other PPE. Same thing with some of our speech lessons, same thing with some of our small group instruction. But in those cases, we will endeavor to keep at least 6 feet of social distance when a mask cannot be worn. The adults that work in our building in more high-risk areas will have N95 masks. In many cases, they'll have face shields, gloves, and gowns in our health office for those who will be working in our isolation room. For some of the individuals who work at one-to-ones with some of our special needs students who have different medical needs and physical needs, different PPE will be provided to students. And if any family is in need of a mask, or students come to school forgetting a mask, or a mask breaks, or a mask gets dirty or soiled, we have ordered tens of thousands of disposable masks to assist us through that process. Infection control strategies is about what we will do if there is an exposure, and also what we're doing to prevent an exposure. So disinfected wipes, readily available. We can get some things that the general public cannot through our county and state contracts. Hand sanitizer, we have an overwhelming supply, and we're hopeful that it lasts us throughout the year, but hand sanitizer available in every classroom. Disposable gloves, masks and face shields, sanitation spray and towels. Ms. Dunkel is going to tell you about a piece of equipment that we've purchased for each building to help us with that deep cleaning that we'll talk about. And again, I don't need to read every bullet from every slide for you. This is a summary of a lot of what we've spoken about. And again, all of these slides will be on the website tomorrow morning. What we do on the playground will be somewhat restricted because there is some equipment that just isn't safe for use right now. But when we can get children outside, we will absolutely have children outside and take advantage of outdoor learning environments as much as possible. And again, COVID-19 resource persons in every building in the district to make sure these things are happening. We will have very strict and repetitive cleaning and disinfecting routines. I'm so thankful for our custodial and building and ground staff who have been so open to learning the new routines and materials and strategies that we'll be using for cleaning and disinfecting. We will talk about deep cleanings that will take place on Wednesdays and on Saturdays, but please don't think that is the only cleaning that will take place. Regular daily cleaning every evening will occur of every classroom and every trafficked area. Routine cleaning will also take place during the instructional day of high-touch areas like bathrooms, like doorknobs, like our kitchen and cafeterias. The list is there that you can see of places that will have additional cleaning throughout the day. Faucets, sinks. Our custodians are going to be perpetual motion using their cleaning and disinfecting products. This talks about our partnership with the Department of Health to make sure that we have scenarios and response plans in place, all in accordance with the American Disabilities Act and in respect of HIPAA restrictions. HIPAA is the laws that speaks to privacy in people's medical conditions. So please know that if you receive a letter from me that says a student or a staff member or an individual has tested positive for COVID and this is the response we must take, I know how unsettling that can be, but I'll also parents to understand and respect at the onset that at no time will I be able to disclose the information about who that person is unless that individual gives me express consent to do so, which I don't really advise people to do. We are entitled to private lives. We're entitled to privacy with our health condition. So if you see a letter from me that says a student, a staff member, that's really the likely information I'll be able to provide. We will try to narrow it down. We would certainly not say in the district. We will identify a building, and we will tell you what actions are necessary dependent upon the level of exposure. And again, it can vary from if the person was exposed to a person testing positive, to it being the spouse or the family member of a student or a staff member. Doctor's notes, again, anytime we can partner with the medical community to help guide our actions, we're in a better position. And while I can work globally with the Department of Health and some members of the medical community, you working directly with your physician and your child's physician will bring the greatest benefit. Health hygiene will be part of our curriculum. Our students will be taught how to stay safe and healthy. We will hang up posters. We will submit flyers. We will have some training videos that we're preparing for our community, which will be placed on the website and distributed via School Messenger. We want to help you keep you and your family safe. So talking about some of these important restrictions will be part of it. Hand hygiene is something we've heard from the onset of COVID-19. It hasn't become any less important. So students knowing how to appropriately use soap and water for the lengthy period of time, the frequency in which they wash their hands will be important. There will be signage in every bathroom. There will be reminders in every classroom. Simple things like coughing into your elbow to give an extra layer of protection, so your respiratory emissions don't come out and project it into the classroom. Even when wearing a mask, doubling up the safety is advisable. And this speaks to some of the things that will be included in our guidance regarding hand hygiene and hand sanitation. And this speaks to some of the respiratory hygiene that is considered best practice. So this is what you'll see on those flyers. This is what the children will see in posters. This will be the information that your child's teacher reviews with them in class. And the younger your children are, the more frequently this information will need to be repeated. So when your child comes home and you say, well, what did you learn in school today? Well, I learned how to wash my hands and throw away a tissue appropriately. That's good. We are living in a global pandemic. The more healthy habits we can instill in our children, the more likely it is we won't experience another global pandemic. There will be special accommodations made for vulnerable populations, up to including staff and students not returning to our school buildings. We understand that for some medical conditions, it's simply not worth the inherent risk of returning to a more densely populated area for either a faculty staff member or a student. So accommodations will be made as necessary in conjunction with the medical community. If your child has a medical condition that requires a specific accommodation, we need to hear from you and need to have helpful directions from your child's physician so that we can make those accommodations. But if the accommodation is that my child needs to stay home, that is implementing a distance learning plan for your child. We also understand that some parents simply will not be comfortable sending their children back. We know that many of you have responded differently since March 13th when our students were last in the buildings. Some of you likely have not ventured into restaurants or back into the community. Some of you have probably kept your family and yourself very isolated from the other members of the community and really don't anticipate that changing until perhaps there's a vaccine or a known direct cure. We understand that. And while it is not a requirement of New York State, we are giving parents the right and certainly the flexibility of saying, I am not comfortable. I would like my child to have a 100% distance learning plan. In the survey responses that you send to me, between 6 and 8% of parents indicated, we haven't heard the plan yet, but we think our decision has been made that we are going to ask for our children to remain at home. Perhaps there's a medical condition, or perhaps it's just discomfort. And then there was another 10 to 15% that said, no, we want to hear the plan first before making that decision, which makes sense to me. So now that we're going through the plan, you're hearing the accommodations, you will have time to decide about whether or not you feel comfortable that we've taken all the actions necessary to keep your child safe. And then you can make that decision. We anticipate somewhere around 10% of our students will not return to our buildings on the days that school is open for their cohort. And at the elementary level, that will be K-5 every day. So we understand that. So we need to have elements of our plan to match our staff, our teachers and support staff, who also cannot return. It could be something as simple as pregnancy, not that that's simple, I'm sorry. It could be anything up to including pregnancy that prohibits teachers from returning to the classroom. So we need to partner our staff that will be working from home with our students that will be learning from home. And at the secondary level, you'll see from the plan, there are some accommodations we can make and that will really be seamless. So this speaks more about making sure we're aware if you have a specific medical condition, a specific concern. I know that many of your questions are going to be individual in nature, and we won't cover them in this forum tonight, but we will cover them prior to the school year beginning. I hope you don't hear my dog barking as clearly as I do. It's rather distracting. Visitors on campus, there aren't going to be many. The visitors on campus will be essential personnel that we need, contracted individuals who work with our students, deliveries that are only essential and will only be in the custodial loading docks, and parents. We are going to refrain from having guest speakers, guest lecturers, things of that nature during our COVID-19 restrictions. And every visitor that comes to the building has to comply with all of those same regulations that our faculty, staff, and students. There will be temperature checks. There will be questionnaires that have insurances, QR codes that will require your smartphone to use your smartphone to scan to assure that all of those restrictions don't apply to you before the building can be entered. In addition, if your child is like mine were, and they forget their lunch, they forget an assignment, they forget their Chromebook, and you need to deliver it to the school, our greeters and our security personnel will meet you at the door to do that. We are limiting access to the buildings whenever possible. Safety drills will be conducted, but they'll be conducted differently. One of the first questions that really came up when we reviewed the plan with staff was, what do you do during a lockdown drill? The answer is you conduct the lockdown drill differently than one would conduct a lockdown. Most of you are familiar with the procedures that we use for our drills, but in the case of a lockdown drill, which speaks to an active shooter event, which God forbid we never experience, where the students hide crouched in a corner behind furniture, out of sight, behind a locked door. We can't practice that during COVID-19. We're not going to socially distant all day and then forget it during a lockdown drill. So the drills will be more discussions, use of videos, older students being guided to remember the drills that we've conducted in the past, but we won't be practicing the same way we have in the past. Now, that led to a question. Well, what if there's an actual emergency? God forbid. There is ever an active shooter or a situation of that emergent nature in our schools. COVID-19 virus will not be our primary concern. We will take whatever action is necessary in an emergency event to protect the safety of our students, faculty, and staff. And the same goes forward in any emergent situation, including how we will drill lockdowns and other health emergencies and fire drills and things of that nature. We talked about spatial distancing and we talked about barriers. This is a mock-up of what the barrier will look like. I don't like that they're called sneeze guards, but that is their intent. It's to give a further barrier of respiratory discharge. If there is a cough, if there is a sneeze, if there's heavy breathing, if the mask is removed and there's a sneeze, if there's a sneeze through a mask, there is an additional layer of protection between student to student, student to teacher, teacher to student. We're trying to minimize respiratory contact whenever possible. There is some research that is current as of today that indicates students at below 10 are at much lesser risk of being spreaders of the virus. So while they can carry the virus, they are much less at risk of spreading it to others, each other and adults. That's really one of the pieces of research and science and interaction with the medical community that led us to feel comfortable to bringing back larger numbers of our elementary population than our secondary. They are smaller. Their furniture is smaller. We can create more space in the classroom. And we also have current research, and admittedly it could change tomorrow, but we have current research that indicates that there is lesser risk of spreading amongst children under 10. So we between the mask and the barriers and that research. That's why you see a discrepancy between our K-5 plan and our 6-12 plan. So each building had to really examine what we're doing and doing differently. We will talk about transportation in a bit, but I can tell you the results of the transportation survey that 1,000 of you were so kind to complete for us. It indicated that 75% of you will find alternative means to transport your students to and from school. I can't tell you how much we appreciate that. It is truly a partnership between the school and community in order to bring our students back. If not for that accommodation that you are helping us to make, we wouldn't be able to reopen our schools. The capacity of buses has to be greatly reduced in order to achieve social distancing on a school bus. And without parents partnering to help transport their children, we would not be able to open our schools. That said, when 80% of the students had been taking the bus, and now 80% of students won't be taking the bus, and we have to stagger and socially distance our arrival, we have to do things very differently. When you add temperature checks to the morning routine, we have to do things very differently. So our principals were charged, along with their task force committee members, to come up with some building-specific plans. So thankfully, each of our principals was able to join us tonight, and we also have 3 of our assistant principals here, and I thank them. But I'm going to ask Ms. Milan to enable her camera and talk us a bit through just an overview, if you wouldn't mind, Ms. Milan, the Harley Avenue procedures.
Thank you, Dr. Bossert. Good evening, everyone. I hope you all are well. I miss you all and your children, and I look forward to seeing you all in the fall. So all of our buses now will be entering our small bus circle in the opposite direction than they have entered in the past to help with traffic flow and a holding place for the buses in the court next to Harley Avenue. If a parent or guardian is dropping off their children, they will drop them off in the main entrance area of the school. And we'll be having temperature checks take place in both locations upon entering the building. Please note that the traffic pattern is a little bit different. Our buses will be exiting down Harwick Street, and we ask that parents make a left turn out of Harley Avenue after drop-off. So that's what we have for arrival. Now on the next slide.
Yeah, just give me a signal when you want me to advance. No
Got it. And now for dismissal procedures, parents are going to park their cars, and we will have a staggered dismissal by grade level. Kindergarten starting at 2:45, then first grade at 3:05, and second grade at 3:25. And our buses will leave Harley at approximately 3:40. If you're picking up your child or having someone else pick up your child, we will be distributing pickup passes in the summer mailing, and the pickup passes must be brought for pickup of the children. And you will receive these in the mail before school begins.
Nod your head or something.
Good, I'm good.
Thank you very much, Ms. Milan. And while Alyssa is on the screen, I do have to give a special thank you to Ms. Milan. Ms. Milan, as you noted throughout our distance learning program in the spring, really is very adept to working in the virtual environment and is really a master of graphics and design. And she was really one of the ones who really assisted in putting these slides and this slideshow together. So Ms. Milan, thank you very much for all of your time that you spent helping this plan to come together. And to take us through the Boyd plan, I know Dr. Toscano is with us this evening as well. Dr. Toscano.
Good evening, everybody. It's very good to be here and actually talk about bringing the children back. I'm so excited. So for our arrival procedures, they aren't going to really change very much for the parents or the students. If you look at the bus arrival in the back, there are 3 different entrances where the students enter now for their grade levels. That is where they will get their temperature checks. We are very lucky to have our extra lane, our drop-off lane that will be completed before school begins. So you'll be taking that drop-off lane up into the center. We will have people out. The students will come out, and again, they will enter 3 different stars. The one furthest to the right is 5th. 3rd grade will come through the main, and 4th grade will come through the conference room. Next slide, please. And dismissal basically will be the same in the back as it was before. For parent pickup, we're asking that you keep that. We'll give you an 8.5 by 11 card stock of your child's name. We ask that you keep that right in front of your windshield. We will have several people out there with walkie-talkies, so we know which students to get back into the car to go home with you. We are also going to stagger our times to help alleviate the lines that will be in the circle. So grade 3 will be 1:45 p.m., grade 4 is at 2 p.m., and grade 5 is at 2:15 p.m. And the buses, of course, as you know, do leave at 2:15.
Events. Dr. Scano, thank you very much. For Elwood Middle School, I know both Dr. Sapienza and Ms. Valley are present this evening, and I thank them both very much for their work on the task force. And Dr. Sapienza, would you like to take us through this portion of the plan?
I would, yes. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. It's nice to be here to be able to talk about what school will look like in September. So we've been working, just as the other two schools, to adjust our arrival procedures. And you can see on this graphic that we've made a few adjustments. Our parent drop-off is now going to be the first lane of spots, and you can see the parents will be entering off of Kenneth Avenue. We then rerouted our buses to come in off of Elwood Road, and then they will not interfere with the parent drop-off, and then they can scoot in right in the front of the building. We've also have more entrances for our students to come into the building. You can see 6th grade is by central office over there, where they'll have their temperature check. 8th grade will come in the main lobby, and our 7th grade students will come in near the cafeteria. And we have a place for them to sit socially distant as they wait for us to be able to dismiss them to their classes. And now to our dismissal procedures. So you can see it's similar in the sense of our parents coming in again off of Kenneth Avenue and the buses coming in through Elwood Road. Our students will dismiss by grade in the same places that they entered. And just like Boyd, we will have a staggered dismissal to help ease the traffic flow. We will first do our students who are being picked up, and we'll do it by last name. And then once our students are picked up, we will dismiss by bus over the PA so that our students will not be congregating outside in front of the building. They'll be able to exit and get right on the buses. And that is what we've planned so far for arrival and dismissal.
Thank you so much. And before we click to the high school, I just do want to remind parents that no need to memorize this information. Each building principal will communicate directly with her group of parents so that all of this information is part of your welcome back summer packet as you typically get, along with other relevant information for the school year. So while I'm sure you will refer back to this presentation, there will also be plenty of clarifications and additional reminders and directions received through your students for each building. And with our high school, I know we have the 3 members of our building level administration present tonight, Mrs. Brzezinski, Mr. Cole, Mr. McNamara. Thank you all for taking time out of your evening to join us. And I know, Ms. Brzezinski, perhaps you want to begin. Ms. Brzezinski, we've lost connection. There you are.
Oh.
You're on.
Okay, excellent. Good evening, everyone. It is so nice to be here, like my colleagues, to discuss what it will look like to have our students return in September. I have been working closely with the building administrators to ensure consistency and mostly with the middle school to ensure that there is some congruency in terms of our plan. Very grateful to have Mr. McNamara and Mr. Cole to help with ensuring that our drop-off and pickup entry points are in line with the guidelines. And really, Mr. Cole has taken the lead and Mr. McNamara in terms of this aspect. So I would like to call upon Mr. McNamara to discuss in greater specificity the drop-off and pickup procedures that we have in place for John Glenn High School in September.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brzezinski and Dr. Bossert. I know I share my colleagues' sentiments and how excited we are to be talking about the return of our students. And I'm happy to speak on part of that tonight. So as you can see, this plan should be kind of standard to what it has been in the past. Our bus drop-off lane is going to be the same. Our parent drop-off lane is pretty standard as well. However, we have the added element of seniors who also drive on campus. So we have kind of isolated it to a one entry point, as you can see where the green and red arrows kind of match, to allow for more cars to potentially line up, as we know that there is potentially going to be an increase in the number of parents dropping off their students due to the results of our survey. They would follow the red line and go through. The one difference is that we're not going to have a side entrance anymore. As we have in the past, we're going to do a single point of entry for all of our students. And we do believe with the staggered arrival times of our parent drop-off, our senior student drivers, as well as the staggered time in our buses, that will help us with our screening process inside the building. Our next slide shows that process where we are going to have that single point of entry. Students would get screened, move onward if there are no COVID symptoms, go for a second screening if there are, or if they have a high temperature, where they would then go to the isolation room and or be more evaluated by the nurse. For dismissal, it's very similar to the middle school as well. We will be dismissing our senior student drivers first, and then alphabetically by those students who are either walking or being picked up by their parents. And as buses arrive, they will be dismissed over the loudspeaker as well. Again, this will allow for that staggered dismissal time. And hopefully, just a quick plead for everybody. I know everybody's safe as they're driving through the parking lots. And I know our seniors are very experienced and safe when they're driving as well. But just keep that in mind as we do go through the parking lot. It might be congested at times, but we'll have security out there guiding us along the way. But just please be patient.
Thank you, Mr. McNamara. And before I advance the slide, I want to assure parents that there will be a learning curve for this procedure. Every year when we come back in September, arrival dismissal with our buses and with our drop-off is a bit slower than it will be once the year is up and running. This year, because of how very different our procedures will be, and because of some of the procedures within the building as well, I have recommended, or I will be recommending to the board, that we make an adjustment to our district, to our approved school calendar for this year, and it will stagger our return. My recommendation to the board, as indicated in today's letter, will include to delay the return of teachers until after Labor Day. Pre-COVID-19, we were bringing our staff back prior to Labor Day. Not sure that's our best decision at this point. So we would then stagger after the return of teachers, the return of students at the elementary schools, one grade level at a time, and at the secondary buildings, a reduced cohort. So that will be made far more clear after I have a chance to review the plan with the Board of Education, and any change to the calendar requires the board's approval. So I need to engage the board in that dialogue, get their feedback before we can support a change. But my thinking is to delay the return of teachers and to stagger the return of students, so that we'd be looking at the week of September 14th before we have a complete return of our full population. One of the reasons for that is because of the temperature in the buildings. If we delay that additional week and the lateness of Labor Day works at our advantage this year, we're eliminating one of those typically warmer weeks from our school year, when we know that the buildings are uncomfortable without air conditioning in a regular year, and certainly could become much more so when we are wearing masks and other PPE. So that's a conversation we will have with the Board of Education. I anticipate them to be supportive of that type of thinking, and I will certainly answer any questions they have, and then we will move forward with that planning for the faculty, staff, and students. Again, please recall that the final decision of whether or not our buildings will open lies with the governor, and we do know that the infection rate for our region, which is Suffolk County, will play a role. And again, we have to have 3 plans in place. Students attending school, a hybrid model, which means some are home, some are in school, and then a plan where 100% of our students are fully engaged in remote learning. I like to be transparent with the community. If you ask me if I believe we will be in this model at some point during the school year, I do believe we will. I do believe we will. So we've spent a good deal of time making sure that if we are in this model, we have a program of excellence available to all students. We have resources available for all of our staff so that we can achieve excellence in the digital setting. Okay, so I am not going to call upon each principal because we're only on about slide 30 and we've been going for an hour, and I appreciate the 500 and some odd of you that are participating, and I want to be sensitive to your time. So this is some of the materials that we've reviewed already, how we are going to keep the normal school hours but stagger our arrival and dismissal. We also have to change transitional times within our buildings. So when you think of high school and the bell ringing at the end of the period and all of the students plugging in the hallway and things getting very congested, get that image out of your mind. That's not the way it can work under COVID-19. We will have to also stagger our transitions, and they can limit the congestion in hallways. So unfortunately, that greatly reduces our instructional time during the day. Not only are we making the day shorter with arrival and dismissal, but we also have to increase time for transitions. So the actual student to teacher contact time during COVID-19 will be reduced. That is a challenge we have to face, that we have to accept to maintain the safety and health of our students and staff. It is really not something anyone takes any pleasure in doing, but it is a necessary component of our plan. So this is what a hybrid schedule might look like at the elementary school. We are not starting the year in a hybrid model. We are starting the year with students attending full-time. That requires no explanation. That's almost looking like a typical weekend day. This is if we have to move to hybrid at our elementary levels, where students would be split into cohort A and cohort B. Cohort A would attend school on Monday and Tuesday. Cohort B would attend on Thursday and Friday. The alphabetical split K to 12 will be A to K, L to Z. It's not exactly balanced. We wish it were, but we couldn't allow for siblings to be split. So the elementary balance and the secondary balance is slightly off, regardless of what letter we choose to split the alphabet. But we couldn't make it different at the elementary school and the secondary school without splitting siblings. So there'll be a slight imbalance to the A and B cohort depending on the level. We will do our best to modify classrooms after we learn of all the students that will or will not be attending. We will balance classes to keep our cohorts as small as possible. Wednesday will be a deep cleaning day. That is the day we'll be able to use some of our new equipment, some disinfectant strategies, and really just have the time to do a very thorough cleaning like we can do on the weekends. Please don't mistake that for the only cleaning. It's additional cleaning on top of the cleaning that will take place during the days and after the school days. No one is happy that we're moving forward with a model that doesn't have a good deal of live co-curricular activities and does not have athletics to begin the year. We are also in a model where we're not allowing outside groups into our buildings. All of that said, the only silver lining is it creates opportunities for our custodial crew to focus exclusively on cleaning without entertaining activities that are happening in the buildings and having to be attentive to cleaning up and setting up and participating in athletic preparations. So while we haven't increased the number of our custodial workers, the time they will have to focus on cleaning will be very different. But this is what a typical schedule might look like at Harley Avenue. And please don't look at this as this will be my child's schedule. This is an exemplar of what class might look like and what the structure of the day would be in a hybrid setting. Now, keep in mind what this says is half of the students are with the teacher physically in the classroom. The other half of the students are engaged in a live interaction with the teacher via live stream. We will use all of the elements of the Google environment, including Google Meets, to have synchronous live instruction between teacher and student. So if the teacher in the elementary school is focused on the students in front of her or him in the morning, then those students have specials in the afternoon, and the teacher is then focused on the students at home in smaller groups using live video streaming. So this is what a model might look like that speaks to that setup. And it's very similar to what we would be at Boyd, by the way, in a hybrid setting. It's identical. Fully remote, it might look like this. And again, this is a maybe. This is everyone at home every day. This is what a typical schedule might look like. And you'll see that every class starts with a live opportunity for Google Meet and then goes into different aspects of the day with multiple occasions for live interaction with the teacher, and then useful of asynchronous resources, new web-based resources that Dr. Hull and her team have identified. And Dr. Hull, I realize that I should be asking you to speak to these slides, but you can re-emphasize some of the key ideas when we get to our teaching and learning. So Boyd on a typical day will follow the same hours. We're not changing the hours. It is very difficult to adjust building hours in the Elwood School District because we rely upon buses shared between each of our buildings. And although we are down to 25% of our students relying upon those buses, it's still 25% of our students. So changing times becomes very, very difficult. So the Boyd explanation would be very, very similar to Harley. So this is what a typical day might look like in a hybrid setting. This is an exemplar day. Obviously, it would vary from student to student, class to class, because of the resources available as far as staffing. But this is what a general overview of a day would look like in the AABB hybrid. We refer to it as AABB because the students whose letters, alphabet, last name is A through K would be in school Monday and Tuesday, meaning the AA. And then everyone would be learning remotely on Wednesday. The teachers will not be in the buildings. They'll be teaching remotely from their homes. And then the BB cohort comes to the buildings on Thursday and Friday in the hybrid model, which is the same as the model we will begin the year with in Elwood Middle School and John Glenn High School. This is, again, what things might look like if we're 100% remote, with opportunities to engage directly with the teacher to start the day, and then at various portions during the day, depending on the subject area. And again, that morning with the kids in the building, I'm sorry, this is fully remote, would have a set schedule and multiple opportunities for synchronous, which means live learning with the teacher. So we are going to begin the secondary year, the 6 to 12 year, in a hybrid setting. So that AABB model is the way we will begin the year. And to answer the question that I know you all have in mind, that's the way we'll begin the year. It's not the way we hope to continue throughout the year. It is our goal to return to 100% of students attending the buildings. We have to monitor the infection rate very carefully. We have to make sure the opening of schools doesn't increase the infection rate and any type of spike level for our district or for our region. And we need to have assurances from the Department of Health that our responses to infections justify bringing all of our children back. So we will be working collaboratively with the region and the medical community to decide when to open the lever a bit more and to the next phase of reopening and bringing our 100% of our secondary back. But for now, we start in a remote setting. So a child will have a typical day when they're in the building with the obvious modifications that we're talking about, but they will follow their schedule differently. Whenever possible, teachers will be traveling to the classroom, and this goes for the elementary school as well. The students won't be traveling between classrooms. We're trying to minimize their exposure as much as possible in any way possible. So when we can keep them in the same room and move the adults, we will. Elwood Middle School in a fully remote environment, again, there is synchronous learning with the teachers, live instruction, and a set schedule. I should mention, and it's a later slide, but attendance will be taken every period. Attendance is mandatory. Distance learning is not optional in the way that we needed it to be at the beginning of the pandemic. It is the expectation that every student is present at every class section, and attendance will be taken and grading will take place. Same for John Glenn High School. The hybrid model is AA, Deep Cleaning Wednesday, BB. By the way, I have to thank Mr. McNamara, who did a bit of an evaluation on our calendar and has kind of helped to determine that when you look at school closures, you know, it immediately came to most of our minds that Monday is the day that school is most frequently closed, and we'd have an imbalance with our AABB cohort. That's not necessarily the case. When we looked at when our closures are timed, throughout the year, it's pretty well balanced between Mondays and Tuesdays and Thursdays and Fridays. So if adjustments need to be made to that schedule due to unanticipated closings, we will do that. But for right now, it's AABB. And again, if we're fully remote at John Glenn High School, we are following a set schedule with multiple opportunities to interact with each teacher. In the hybrid model, and I want to make sure that this is stressed, if your child is at home, they are watching their class take place, interacting with their teacher and classmates remotely. Every teacher will have a camera in the classroom and a microphone to engage through Google Meets with their students. There will be some assurances we need from parents in order for that to take place, to make sure we are maintaining confidentiality for our students, to make sure that our students fully understand expectations while they are learning in a remote environment. We don't expect to see children laying in bed wearing pajamas. We expect all the code of conduct and dress code and all of those things that take place in school to be happening while they're learning remotely. And we're going to be very strict in enforcing that. We cannot create a distance learning environment that is abusive to any student or any member of our faculty or infringes on anyone's privacy. So parents, you will get an acceptable use policy that's a little different this year, which speaks to our expectations for distance learning, both for students and other members of the household. What we can't have is parents standing over their child's shoulders and reporting on social media, which child said what to who in the classroom. If that happens, we have to shut it down. Those are the insurances we've given to our families when they send their children into our school buildings. Confidentiality and privacy will be maintained. So we will be very careful about what our expectations are in a learning environment. But yes, there will be cameras in the classroom so that if a teacher is instructing a lesson, both the students in front of him or her will have the same benefit as the students watching from home. Initially, in my mind, it was going to be passive, that if you were home, you were just observing. But in working with our task force and the various stakeholders, we were able to come up with strategies where it will be interactive, where the use of Google Classroom and Google Meets will enable the students at home to interact in the lesson as well. Teachers to be able to answer questions from students who are at home. Students at home to be able to participate in discussions. This could not be achieved years ago. This cannot be achieved in many districts. The first thing I was worried about was, do we have the bandwidth to do it? We've done our testing, we do. So these are things we can look forward to come September. Dr. Hull, I know I covered a lot in the material that we rehearsed for you to review with the community, so I apologize, but as you know, we share a great deal of passion on this subject. But I will now turn the presentation over to you and forcibly mute myself so that you can take the community through this portion of the presentation. So just let me know when you'd like to advance the slides.
Good evening, everyone. Is that my internet is a little slow, so I apologize if there is any delays. So of course, I join my colleagues in saying that we look forward greatly to welcoming our students back in the safest capacity, and we look forward to a good year. So student need and educational equity are at the center of all instructional decisions. The district will be providing 180 days of instruction, but it will be following multiple days. If you're in the secondary level, your child is at home logging in to the period by period classes in school. Or if you're at the elementary level, it could be that your child is home where they only have a portion of their day live or synchronous with their teacher. There they don't log in period by period in the K-5 hybrid. But we hope to have our K-5 students in daily. So we will be meeting our 180 days through a variety of methods. In addition, we will meet the requirement of 180 minutes of instruction in grades 6 through 12. This will also be done through a variety of methods. What's different between be documenting through taking attendance and through engagement in activities. So we really are requiring our students to be present on camera at all the times they will be assigned when they get their actual schedule, not following the times necessarily of our sample schedules. But student participation will be key, and it will be evaluated. The school calendar also has some staff-only days at the beginning of the year, and Dr. Bossert will be telling you a little bit about potential shifts in our school calendar. So during some of our staff-only days, we will be conducting orientation in a modified way for our students entering new buildings. That's our kindergartner, 3rd grade, 6th, and 9th grade students. And also, as we enter the new year, we are placing a heavy focus on building relationships. A lot of research that school culture is based on quality relationships between students and teachers, and that strong academic success sits on the shoulders of school culture. So in this complex new way of teaching, we sector education and the quality relationships between educators and students. Dr. Foster, please move forward. In the hybrid or remote learning, there will be certain groups of students prioritized for in-person learning to the greatest extent possible. For example, in our hybrid model, where students are in 2 days a week and home 3 days a week, students in special class settings, which could be 8 children, 1 adult, or 15 children, 1 adult, will be in all 4 days, the Monday, Tuesday AA, and the Thursday, Friday BB. We join many districts in doing this model for our students because certain populations will require more in-person instruction, but also these are groups that are spending their day together as a cohort, and so it aligns to the regulations surrounding reducing students mixing together in different areas. They stay within their cohort. We know that through what happened in the spring and now through the summer, that there will be gaps in learning. Our district has procured a program called iReady, which we will be using as a diagnostic tool to assess student learning. In the past, we utilized STAR testing in grades K through 8, also not a test like a state test, but computer adaptive. So all students start with the first 5 questions, but after that, it shifts to identify each student's personal instructional level. The other benefit of iReady is that the testing is more closely aligned to our instructional program, and it will give our teachers practical information as they plan their lessons. We also
Dr. Hull, I'm afraid that I'm going to have to take the reins back. Your internet is getting very spotty, and it's difficult, and your voice is going in and out. So I know you went to great lengths to make yourself available tonight, and I really appreciate that. But I think for the viewing audience, they might prefer if I speak to some of the slides, and I apologize for having to do that. But as Dr. Hull was saying, we will have assessments in place because we understand that this is not a typical September. We know that not every student progressed at the level that they would have in a regular setting in our virtual environment. So we can't say this is where students would typically be in September, so here's where we will start. No, we must begin the year with an assessment in place using the tools and strategies that our curriculum department has developed in order to guide our learning through assessing students. And credit to the team for identifying some wonderful web-based resources so that we can assess the students in the virtual setting as well as when they are in school. As Dr. Hull mentioned, our grading practices will go much more back to a typical format. This is not going to be a pass-fail situation. There are going to be clear expectations set by the classroom teacher in each department that will speak to what is expected for academic success. And whether that learning is taking place in the traditional classroom or in the virtual classroom, there will be grading and assessment of students and the issuing of report cards. We will continue to teach and align with the New York State Learning Standards, and we will prepare for the assessments that typically come in the spring, whether it's the 3 to 8 assessments or the Regents exams or AP exams. We will teach our students believing that those assessments will occur, even though some of them were greatly modified last year. We want to make sure our students are prepared to achieve at the highest level. And again, some of these items we spoke to about what will happen in the classroom as far as traffic in and out and social distancing. Again, special area teachers traveling into the classroom whenever possible, rather than students visiting multiple environments during the day, and using outside space as much as we can. That will really be key to our comfort and our flexibility, that on the nice days, we take advantage of outdoor environments. I know Ms. Milan had identified some wonderful outdoor learning mats, picnic type spaces that are already identified with spots that are 6 feet apart for the students to sit on. I'm thinking of, what was that game? Twister, on a big mat with the spaces further apart. And we really need to take advantage of some of the spaces we have outside. We have big, beautiful grounds. So if we're able to take advantage of that and give students a chance to get their masks off, give students a chance to expand their lungs and expand their muscles, we absolutely will do that. And then here are the sample school schedules that I already took you through and stepped on Dr. Hull's toes. So again, we heard your feedback from the spring. We listened to our educators within the district and came up with what we believed would be the best models for instruction. This is a summary of basically what I've gone over about how the live instruction will focus on the students in the room with the opportunity for engagement from the students that are learning at home. And clearly the learning that the teacher designs and refines their curriculum will lend itself to the environment the students are in. So for instance, in a lab-based setting at the secondary level, some students will participate in the lab-based activity on the days they were in, and then the lab will be concluded when the other cohort of students are in. So all students have a similar experience. And again, student attendance will be mandatory and their engagement will be monitored. So if a student is merely present, that is not fully participating in the class. They'll be expected to participate. Cameras will be expected to be on. Attire will be expected to be appropriate. All the things we spoke about. The teachers will help to set the tone for their classroom as they do in the regular environment. And their grading practices, again, will be adapted for the hybrid model, but will be defined by the teacher department, the grade level. Transportation. As you know, in the Elwood School District, we have an executive director of transportation and technology. Mr. Tranchino has held that position for some time now and has brought some wonderful initiatives to the Elwood School District. While he would much prefer to talk about technology, this is a portion of the presentation where he gives us a brief overview of transportation. Mr. Tranchino.
Thank you, Dr. Bossert. Good evening, everybody. I'm glad to be here to give you this update on district transportation. These slides are going to address the mandated assurances by the contractor and the district. And our goal, of course, is to work with our contractor to make busing as safe as possible. Cleaning and disinfecting, our buses will be sprayed thoroughly with a disinfectant that is EPA approved and kills 99% of germs and viruses on contact, of course, including the human coronavirus. It is designed to dry on surfaces and remains effective up to 30 days. Additionally, the high contact areas and really a good portion of the bus is going to be resprayed every day, evening with that same product. Next slide. PPE and sanitizer. Well, hand sanitizer, as you've probably heard, is somewhat combustible when it gets very hot in direct sunlight. So the buses will not be equipped with the hand sanitizer, and the contractor and their staff on the bus may not carry personal bottles of hand sanitizer. We will ensure that they enforce that the drivers, monitors, and attendants must wear a face covering along with optional face shield. And we enforce that the transportation staff, drivers, attendants, mechanics, and cleaners will be trained on the proper use of the PPE. Next slide. More on the contractor's assurances. They will train the staff on distancing and have periodic refreshers on that. We will ensure that that is taking place. We will ensure that they provide PPE, such as masks and gloves, for their drivers, their monitors, bus monitors, and attendants in the buses. And the district will ensure that the contractor will provide gloves for drivers, monitors, and/or attendants who must have direct physical contact with the child. Next slide. More on the contract. Upon arrival to work, as we are doing at the Elwood School District, the drivers are being screened. They're doing this summer. They've started this already, of course. The contractor has assured me this is occurring every day. They're being screened for symptoms, and they have their protocol listed here below. They're using the number that it's a 100.0 degrees Fahrenheit. Otherwise, without that being below your temperature, below that number, you're asked to leave the property, and then their protocol kicks in as to when you can come back to work. So they will be screening their staff. Next slide, please. And now our students. Students must wear a mask on a school bus if they're physically able. If they don't have a mask, they will not be denied transportation. However, they'll be provided one by the district. There will be masks on the bus for a student to take if that mask comes off and ends up in a puddle just before they get on, or they realize that the bus stop, they've left it on the dining room table. Students with a disability, which would prevent them from wearing a mask, will not be forced to do so or denied transportation. And the students will be reminded constantly, as we will be doing throughout the day, and we are doing at home with our children already, about social distancing, safety, hygiene, and proper PPE usage, specifically while at the bus stop, riding the bus, and exiting the bus. Next slide. So regardless of what Elwood School District is doing, whether we are remote, we are hybrid, or we are all in person, students will be provided with private and parochial school transportation, private schools, charter schools, we don't have charter schools, or students with IEPs will have them placed out of district. So if Elwood goes all remote and those private schools are not all remote, you will be provided transportation. That is a mandate that we will follow and something you can count on. And I believe that is my last slide for transportation. Thank you, Dr. Bosser. Have a good evening, everybody.
Well, Mr. Tranchino, I thank you very much, and we'll see you again in a few slides for the hat that you prefer to wear.
There you go. Thank you.
For facilities, the chair of our facilities committee was co-chaired by Ms. Dunkel, our assistant superintendent for business, and Mr. John McDonald, our director of facilities. Ms. Dunkel has become extremely well-versed in all matters of compliance with COVID-19 and has been at the center of making sure our district has been able to procure the necessary elements to make this plan work. Ms. Dunkel, I will call upon you in just a second. But if I'm a community member and I'm starting to listen to some of the things about the vast amount of resources that we have had to dedicate to preparing for reopening our schools, I'm hearing PPE, I'm hearing hand sanitizer, I'm hearing new equipment for cleaning, I'm hearing additional Chromebooks, or I will hear about that. There's been a lot of money invested into the reopening. It was money that was not budgeted for. When we spoke in the spring about the budget and the need to really tighten our belts and make difficult decisions to reduce the budget, we were serious. There is no hidden pocket or cash drawer. So the decisions that we've had to make to dedicate funding towards health and safety are in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. That was not budgeted, which means we have to reduce other areas. So please prepare that there is no magic bullet of funding coming from the state of New York. There is limited funding reimbursable available through a program similar to FEMA, but that money is competitive and very limited. So we will have to make sacrifices to other areas of our budget. Some of them may be natural and they're not fun. If we can't have fall sports, clearly we save some money there. If we can't have co-curricular activities, clearly we save some money there. It's not money we want to save. That's where we enjoy investing our dollars because it directly impacts students in a positive way. But we will have to identify sacrifices to our program to make up for the expenses for health and safety. That said, I'd spend every dollar to make sure that we have health and safety in place, health and safe practices in place for our students. And we have, to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars at this time. So when you hear about reductions later in the year, please remember the elements of this presentation that we focused on that were not budgeted items. Ms. Dunkel, how's your connectivity?
I think it's okay. Thank you, Dr. Bossert.
All right.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I just want to mention facilities, a huge part of facilities is the health and safety, much of which we have already gone over. As it relates to the plan, the state asks that the school district be in compliance with the New York State building codes and fire codes. So that's some of the things that I'm going to be focusing on in this group, as well as going over some of the layouts of the classrooms that have been set up for the reopening of schools. But before I get started, I just wanted to, in addition to the health and safety items that Dr. Bossert spoke of, he spoke about masks and gloves and PPE equipment. We've also purchased the fever scanners. He mentioned one additional item we purchased are electrostatic sprayers. Those are going to be used each evening and specifically on Wednesdays when the buildings are closed at the middle school and high school. It's electrostatic spray. It sprays an additional sanitized sprayer that is to assist in killing the virus as well. So that's another additional purchase that we made that's going to help keep our buildings clean and safe. We've also purchased wireless microphones and speakers that'll assist in our technology plan, which Mr. Tranchino will go over. And our biggest purchase so far, as Dr. Bossert mentioned, are the desk guards, the sneeze guards. They have various names for each of the students' desks, as well as the faculty. So much of the facilities in health and safety is a driving force to keep our students and faculty safe and healthy. So regarding compliance, each school will ensure all existing and new alcohol-based hand rub dispensers are installed in all of our locations where necessary. And again, those all have to be in compliance with Fire Code of New York State. When it speaks to installation of dividers in classrooms, libraries, cafeterias, and those type of classroom functions, the Office of Facilities Planning has to approve all of those. That really has to do with building new structures, which right now we don't have plans to do. So some of these compliance items are not applicable to us, but we do have to include it as part of our plan. Additionally, speaking of new building construction and temporary quarter projects, again, we don't have any plans for that, but they do have to be included and reported to the Office of Facilities Planning if in fact we decide to do that. Permanent tents, Dr. Bossert already addressed. We are not planning on using those either. And regarding toilets and sink fixtures, we have to make sure that that's in compliance with the building code of New York State. We don't have any plans right now to reduce any of our toilet and sink fixtures, but we are reducing the number of students who will be able to utilize the bathroom at one time to help with the cleanliness. Another major factor has to do with our water fountains. It's required that we have one fountain per 100 occupants in each building, but the guidelines are recommending to not have communal water fountains. So we are in the process of replacing many of those with water bottle filling stations. And in the areas where we cannot, the water fountains will be turned off. I know there are some water fountains in the classrooms. We're still addressing those issues. But in addition to having the one station per 100 occupants, alternatives to that is to supply the students and faculty with bottled water, which we will have the capability to do. And we're also going to recommend that staff and students bring in their own water bottles. Next slide, please. Our HVAC systems, an important part of the air filtration or airflow in all of our buildings. Our HVAC systems are routinely checked and operational performance are continually monitored to ensure proper ventilation and airflow. Our heating and ventilating maintenance is performed by district personnel on a constant basis. All of our systems currently meet with the Office of Facility Planning standards and meet the required code for ventilation. The goal is to utilize current equipment to maximize our air intake or outside air that will be coming into the buildings. And that's all, again, in accordance with the guidelines of New York State. Unfortunately, ceiling fans will not be allowed as they will circulate the disbursement of respiratory droplets. It's unfortunate because part of our bond, we've had ceiling fans installed in many of our classrooms, but unfortunately, they will not be able to be used, which poses a challenge for the classrooms because of heat. But I'm sure we'll continue to talk about that. But that's one of the reasons we're going to be having mask breaks for both the staff and students to help keep them refreshed. So then, fortunately, ceiling fans cannot be used. Next slide, please. Another compliance we have to adhere to has to do with our visual building inspections and building condition surveys. That's something that New York State does on an annual basis. And part of the compliance for the plan is just to state the fact that we do in fact have those scheduled, and we will continue to do that. We're not looking to disrupt that process. Same thing with lead in water testing. Once the students have returned to school, we will start our lead water testing, and our engineers have already identified which of those outlets will be tested. That's something that we have to comply with New York State on an annual basis as well. Next slide. Dr. Bossert, do you want me to continue to speak, or would you like to speak about the classrooms? I can continue.
Go right ahead.
Okay. So this is our Harley Avenue primary school. Ms. Milan, if you feel you want to jump in, you can do that as well. The requirements of New York State have to be a minimum of 3 feet or more to 6 feet apart. The reason we are allowed to do in this particular drawing of Harley Avenue classrooms, those are 6 feet tables, but with the 2 barriers that Dr. Bossert mentioned, both the masks and the desk guards that we have, that is what allows us to have the students closer together than 6 feet. They will be roughly 3.5 feet apart between themselves as well as the teacher.
If I may, before I advance the slide, I think it's important for parents to understand these pictures look extremely sterile. You have to keep in mind, we put the furniture in place to mock up so everyone would have an idea. We knew we could have the required appropriate social distancing between the furniture and what it would look like with the guards in place. That said, teachers will still have the ability to personalize classrooms. Things are not hanging on the walls in these pictures, they will be. But we have removed a lot of the unused furniture from the rooms in order to create the maximum amount of space. The crescent table that is in every elementary classroom can be removed and stored right now because we can't bring students together for a tight small group instruction. Some classroom carpeting has to be removed. We need to keep the areas as sterile as possible. We'll make them warm and inviting and friendly to the best of our ability, but our focus will be on cleanliness and sterilization. So that's one of the reasons why we have our partners coming in from Syntax, who manage our website and some of our newsletters and things, to help us create videos for welcome back for each building. They'll be working with members of the administration, the principals, to put together videos to demonstrate to students what their arrival might look like, to show them some of the signage, to talk to them about temperature screenings, and then to give them a bird's eye view into the classroom so they don't have complete culture shock when re-entering the buildings that will look very different than when they left them. So we want to make sure that we prepare them for entering these new environments, and you as well as parents, so you have a sense of where your students are attending school. For things like Meet the Teacher Night, that'll be done virtually. So we want to make sure you also have a bird's eye view into the classroom space and have a sense of how we are keeping things clean and organized and sanitary. So while this serves as a real photo at Harley Avenue, please understand that this was a summer mock-up.
Okay, so this is a mock-up of a boy classroom as well. I believe there are 20 student desks in this particular drawing. And again, the desks are not 6 feet apart. The teacher's desk would be 6 feet apart from the closest student, but the students will be seated at least, that should say 3.5 feet apart in accordance with the current guidelines. So again, with having the goal of having everyone having a mask as well as the desk guards, that is the safest option that we have at this point within the classroom. So we are designing our classrooms to look just like this.
And just to clarify, as I'm sure you can tell, those are illustrations of the desk guards. The product that we have ordered has been ordered. They'll be manufactured and delivered to the district right around the 1st of September. Then they have to be assembled and put into place. But these are just illustrations of what those guards will look like. Please don't think your child will be staring through a cloud throughout the day.
Yes, that was a pretty close picture of the one that we do have in one of the earlier slides. But it is a U shape, so the student is protected on 3 of the sides. So that's a good thing. Next slide. Elwood Middle School, as you can see, this classroom, because the students are larger students, larger equipment, as Dr. Bassett mentioned earlier. This particular classroom has 14 student desks and a teacher desks. And here the desks are actually 6 feet apart. So again, keeping social distancing as best we can. And I know that, that's okay. No, that's okay. It's a similar, in John Glenn High School, same type of classroom setup. Desks will be 6 feet apart as well as the teacher station. And as Dr. Bassett mentioned earlier, at the middle school and high school, the students, at the elementary schools, the students will be staying in one classroom all day with breaks, obviously. In the middle school and high school, the goal is to keep the students in there as much as possible, but there are times where they will have to move from classroom to classroom. But with the 6 feet, the 6 foot distance between the desks, again, it helps us with appropriate social distancing.
One of the things we take great pride in the Elwood School District is using best practice for instructing of students and strong pedagogical skill. Unfortunately, there are some traditional best practices that we have to abandon during COVID-19. Teachers will not be able to engage in small group work in a live setting. Virtually, yes, and we can group students that way, but when they are here, we are going to have them seated in their desks. The desks will be in rows. They'll maintain appropriate social distancing. That is a very different model. We have won grants and spend all kinds of grant funding on flexible seating and unique furniture. If you think about some of the classrooms at John Glenn High School filled with couches looking like lounges, and students being able at Elwood Middle School to venture into the common areas and work at all the different tabletops and things of that nature, that has to be paused. We have to put those strategies on hold right now. As I said to the faculty earlier today, and as Dr. Hull said, we will also hand out the slates and the chalk. We need to have a 1955 model of what a classroom looks like to maintain our safety, health, and welfare. The teacher will be at the front of the room. The students will be seated at their desks, masks on behind a barrier, spaced out from one another. It is not what we'd like it to be, but this is how we maintain everyone's health and safety. The teacher will be teaching from the front of the room whenever possible and maintaining his or her distance from the class appropriately. The smartboard, the technology, will be integrated into the day in the classroom, just as it will be when students are in the virtual environment, and that's the way we will connect. The reduced screen time that we're looking for moving forward, there will be a good deal of screen time, both when the students are present and when they're at home. There are strategies that we have to use to maintain our health and safety during the global pandemic. And this is just the reality. When we put these slides up for the faculty earlier today, I think I heard some audible gasps. I agree. This is not what I'd ever want to walk into and see when looking at Danielson's highly effective models of teaching. This is not the blueprint. This is the blueprint to keep students healthy and safe during COVID-19. Ms. Dunkel, I know you worked closely with Ms. Pugh, our Director of Food Services. I will go quickly through these slides, but if there's anything that you'd like to interject, please do.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Child nutrition pertains to both the students that are home and the students that are in school. Meal distribution took place to over 100 families during the period, time of our building closure. We made it available to families in need through our free and reduced lunch program, and then any other family who requested. So we serviced over 100 families during the school closure. So it's important that meal service remains available both for the students that are in the buildings and the students that are learning from home on the alternate cohort days. So we're redefining our kitchens to make sure there's appropriate social distance, that all new Board of Health regulations are met as far as the PPE amongst the kitchen staff and their cleaning and cleanliness, and we'll make certain that food service lines are held correctly. In order to have appropriate social distancing, not every student will be able to eat in the cafeteria every day. Some lunch service will take place in classrooms. Now, there will never be a time where a student eats 100% of their meals in the classroom, and there won't be a time where they have 100% of their meals in the cafeteria. A rotating schedule will be developed by the principals, and there'll be far more use of the cafeteria available at the secondary level because of the size of those rooms and the type of seating flexibility that we have with our current furniture. But we will follow all the recommended guidelines for safe serving of foods. All safety regarding students with allergies. So the same accommodations we have to make for students with allergies within the cafeteria that will be made in the classrooms on the days that students are eating in classrooms. It actually is a bit easier to make those accommodations because of how frequently we are cleaning and disinfecting all surfaces. So we will comply with everything that's required for safety as far as students with allergies, and we will also be meeting all nutrition requirements and also requiring hand hygiene before and after students are eating, as this slide indicates. Child nutrition requirements are not pausing, so the meals that we'll be preparing in school will maintain all of the same nutrition regulations as they do. The to-go meals that we serve pickup will follow those same guidelines, and we also will try to present varieties to our students, so some fan favorites will return, and I put in a special request for Taco Tuesday. Cleaning and disinfecting will take place regularly. In addition to the typical cleaning that custodians do during lunch periods, there will be additional cleaning and disinfecting and wiping with sanitizing equipment, both in the classrooms after eating and in the cafeteria after eating. Trash will be removed with greater frequency as well. Communicating with families means that all this information will be made to every family in multiple languages to make sure that every family in need of food service will receive the information so that they can procure healthy meals for their children. Social distancing will not pause during food service. There will be occasions for picnic style eating when we can take the children outside to eat. We'll be happy to do that. Obviously, there is courtyard space in both our middle school and high school, and our paraprofessionals and teacher assistants taking children outside to eat at the elementary school under close supervision can certainly occur as well. We look forward to that. Again, specific information regarding food service for classroom and all of this will be available on the website and repeated as part of your opening packets. Special education. It is clear that students with special needs have individualized programs. Every student in the special education has an IEP, an individualized education plan. Many of those plans had to be reviewed and amended and have accommodations made due to COVID-19. To speak to the next few slides, I'm going to call upon our newly appointed Executive Director, Mrs. Eileen Kelly-Gorman, who transitioned from her role as our Math Science Technology Director to the position of Executive Director for Special Education and PPS on July 1st. And if you want to talk about entering the deep end of the pool and hitting the ground running, Mrs. Kelly-Gorman has done that with expertise. Ms. Kelly-Gorman, would you like to speak to the next few slides?
Sure. You want to advance me?
Sure will.
Good evening. Before I begin, I just want to say that this is going to be a very general overview for a department that really works on individual plans. And so I just want you to know that there are plans underneath this that are much more granular. And once the state approves our plan, then our office will begin reaching out to parents on a more individualized basis and an as needed basis to confirm plans for September. One thing that you should know is that we have developed and will be sending out shortly a survey just for our parents and families who are serviced by our office. Things that we will be inquiring will be your preferred method of communication, the preferred language of communication, but also to start to gather some information regarding your child's ability to wear a mask on a school bus, if they're medically fragile, your intentions or your concerns about them returning to school, things like that. These survey results will then be cross-referenced with our district information so that we know how to best communicate with all of our families. All of our CSE and CPSE meetings will continue to be held remotely until further notice for the safety of all of the participants. Advance me, please, Dr. Bossert. So our department specializes in providing what we call FAPE, but a free, appropriate public education, and we strive to bring equal opportunities for all of our students. So for some of our classrooms where it might be more challenging to socially distance, we will be providing KN95 or N95 masks for our teachers, teaching assistants, and paras. If the students in the room cannot tolerate wearing a mask at all times when they need to be less than socially distanced from the staff. Any other PPE that's required in those rooms will also be provided. We've made arrangements to have testing available in a virtual format as well as an in-person in case we have to switch. Our schedules for all of our students will be reviewed to ensure that the IEP goals can be met for our students. And then if we need to make adjustments, we will certainly be in touch with our parents. As both Dr. Bossert and Dr. Hall stated earlier, we have several different assessment tools that we will be using this year, including iReady, which is a diagnostic. And that's really for us to administer to students at the start of the school year, and then we can progress monitor them so that if we have students who really have had significant gaps since we left in-person school in March, we'll be able to create a customized plan for them and catch them up. Our plan as of right now is to bring our students in our 811 and 1211 classrooms back 4 days a week in 6 through 12. And then obviously all of our students K-5 will be back 5 days a week. So we are looking to increase their services as much as we can. Can you advance me, please? This slide pertains to our parents with students who are serviced outside of our school district. We have sent letters out to each of the schools that we send children to, and we have asked them to provide for us what their plans are for September so that we can be prepared to support you in any way that we may need to. This also includes things like Wilson Tech, who it is our understanding, although we haven't gotten in writing from them yet, is planning to go back 5 days a week in person. And so we have to make plans to accommodate all of our students who participate in that program as well. Next slide, please. And this is the last slide. And again, this just speaks to how we will be monitoring our students' progress towards meeting their IEP goals. We'll use both in-person and virtual measures such as Fountas and Pinnell benchmarking, which many of our K-5 parents are familiar with, the iReady diagnostic. We use things from Reflex Math, and then also just our formal and informal classroom assessments. And again, we will be, reviewing student progress at 5 and 10 week intervals. And then we will be in touch with parents as we need to be from there. I think you can move to the next slide, Dr. Bossert.
Before you continue, Ms. Kelly-Gorman, and I know you're going to cover these slides as well, and I thank you. I just wanted to reemphasize something that Mrs. Kelly-Gorman said, in that we understand the very unique challenges that some of our students with special needs have. And we also understand that you as parents have very specific questions about how some of these modifications for your child and maintaining your child's health and safety will be conducted in classrooms. So rather than posing those questions tonight or entering those questions into the reopening email address, I would ask you to reach out to the correct member of the PPS team, special ed team, Mrs. Mahoney, Mrs. Sepp, Mrs. Kelly-Gorman, in order to get some additional clarification information about your child. I imagine that for every parent, there's some angst and some hesitancy about what September may look like. And for parents of students with special needs, I imagine that's magnified greatly. So please know, we will take as much time as needed to speak to you, to meet with you, to exchange information with you, so that you feel comfortable in the decision of sending your child to our program, where we will focus on every student's social and emotional well-being. And to take us a bit briefly, and please understand this will be an element of everything we do in September, focusing on the well-being of our students, but we have some specific ideas that Mrs. Kelly-Gorman will discuss.
Yes, the irony of the speed I will go through these slides compared to the amount of time we'll dedicate to it once we are back in September. As many of you know, we have several programs set up, K-12 for social emotional health for our students, and those programs will continue. Our PBIS, our Mind Up in our elementary buildings. But to help us plan for the reopening, I have worked with Ms. Sicko, Ms. Kretz, and Mrs. Sepp to develop a mental health survey that we will also be sending to families. You'll be getting a lot of mail from us or email from us in the next few weeks. But this is to help us have an idea of what your child's needs are as we return to school. And if we find that in your responses, you have some real concerns for your child, it also gives us an opportunity a month before school starts to start reaching out to your family and to get them in touch with the mental health professional from your building and help your child to really be ready emotionally to return in September. We will also be working on putting together a website with resources for parents as well as for our staff and for our children, with resources to help you begin to transition mentally for September. Again, we know that many families have gone through, tremendous losses, whether it is emotional, financial, and so we're just looking to be there in any way that we can for all of you. I think that you can go to the next slide. And this just sums up the secondary. It speaks to many of the same things. Like I said, that survey will be sent K-12. I also believe that it is our plan for our older students to give them their own survey once they come back so that they can really let us know their own needs individually. But of course, we would encourage you to speak to your child as you're doing that survey.
So I'll speak to the next slide. Thank you, Ms. Kelly-Gorman, which speaks about communication and community engagement. There is a requirement, and the governor spoke to it today, about making certain that parents and community members, all stakeholders, played a key role in helping us to design our reopening plans. And I am so thankful to the 115 members of the community who volunteered to serve in this capacity. I'll repeat again that no volunteers were turned away. Initially, we thought that the work size of the group might negatively contribute to our ability to be productive. But rather than turning anyone away, we simply took the larger group and divided the group into 4 subcommittees to make our work as productive and as focused as possible. So for those of you that sacrificed those multiple days and those long Zoom meetings, I really do appreciate all of your input, and I hope that you're seeing the work that we've talked about now collectively appearing in this plan. For those who served on the task force, a lot of this is not new information for you. So making certain that you understand every aspect of the plan is our goal. Mrs. Marks is texting me that she has received a number of questions that we'll be able to respond to at the conclusion of the presentation. She has also informed me, luckily, that many of the questions that are being posed have been asked subsequently to them being posed. But having you understand the model, having a chance to respond and let us know any concerns you have and ask questions is important to us. As we said, this is a fluid document and no good ideas are off the table. A number of parents have reached out with suggestions of things they either read or are happening in other states, information they heard about other districts, sending helpful articles, sending helpful clips. All of that has been reviewed. No good idea has been turned away. And a lot of ideas have incorporated themselves into our plan. It is essential that parents see themselves, and you are, partners in this experience. We can't be successful without you partnering with the district to make sure that everything that is in the plan comes into practice. In addition, I think you're all aware that I am very much involved with the statewide organization of school superintendents in the county level organization. Those affiliations have given the Elwood School District some direct insight and input into guidance coming from Albany and guidance coming from the Suffolk County Department of Health. The Q&A FAQ that comes out from the Department of Health with all the different scenarios, I was the one coming up with many of the scenarios of the things that are keeping me up at night to say, well, what if? I can't be Bob Manfred. I can't be caught off guard because the Florida Marlins went to a bar. We need to have a plan in place regardless of what may occur in our schools. So imagining all of the different variations and scenarios and posing them to the Department of Health and giving them time to process, do their own research, create their own response has been invaluable. So we are engaging the medical community and the members of our community who are part of the medical community. We are working with our BOCES. We are working with the other area superintendents. We're working with the personnel administrators, the curriculum council. We are not working in isolation. We are trying to make sure we are taking advantage of every regional resource at our disposal within the county, within the state, to make sure we are providing the best possible solutions to COVID-19 for our students. So again, surveys you have received, you will continue to receive surveys. All of this information, all of these slides will be on the website tomorrow morning. There will be a new website, there's the link to it, in place so that you can easily navigate each of the topics that we've covered tonight. The 52-page document, if you are a reader who just prefers text, will be placed on the website. And again, the reopening email address will be used to pose any questions. We are also going to use the questions that come up in those emails and came up tonight through communication with Mrs. Marks to create a district FAQ. If we see a pattern, and Mrs. Marks indicates to me that we have, if we see a pattern or a grouping of parents asking, similar or the same question, we'll put out a frequently asked questions guide, and we will send that to all parents and post it on our website so that's there. If we see some common misconceptions or common questions, we can address them directly. You will get used to hearing automated messages. You will likely hear an automated message every Sunday night reminding you to do that return to school survey, that statement of assurances questionnaire for Monday morning. You will continue to receive video updates from me. If you enjoy them, great. If you don't, I apologize. I know I get sometimes long-winded, but I want to make sure you have all the information that you need to feel comfortable with what's happening in our schools. I also hope that once the school year begins, we can use that platform to talk about the good things happening in classrooms. I hope that not every update is focused on solely health and safety. I want to talk about things that our students are accomplishing. I want to talk about interesting instructional designs our teachers are using. So I hope that we get to talk about some celebratory initiatives in addition to just giving updates about health and safety. So again, our website will be the central hub of all of our information. And I hope you're used to going there for updated information about everything to do with our district. How we are working with COVID-19 will be no exception. Everything that is going into our planning, you'll be able to review on the website. And all of our staff will be completely trained. Our staff had a meeting earlier today to go through all of this information. Each principal is holding individual faculty meetings within the next days. We will have multiple days of training before we reopen in September. And all of our staff will be watching a number of video tutorials through a network that we use called Global Compliance. I think I've said all of this. When decisions have to be made regarding response to any COVID-19 exposures, if we have a positive case, you will receive emergency automated calls. You will never have to hear through the grapevine that one of our buildings is closed or our district needs to close or a singular class needs to quarantine. And again, while we have to maintain confidentiality within those communications, we will give you as much information as possible to calm any anxieties that would be associated with that type of messaging. Ms. Pam Fine is present with us tonight. Ms. Fine is our Director of Humanities, which includes focus on our bilingual education and world languages, our E&L students.
91.
So Ms. Fine, would you please take the community through the next few slides?
Right now, bilingual education and world languages.
Why? Mrs.
Hearing
Brzezinski,
someone
can
who
you
should be on
can
mute.
you mute?
Yep, whoever isn't on mute, please do so. And Ms. Fine, if you could take us through the slides, that'd be terrific.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. These slides will address our bilingual program or our ENL program for students who speak languages other than English. Our reopening plan addresses some of the requirements when a new student enters our school district. There is a process to evaluate their need for English language services. New York State has extended some of those guidelines, and this is an assurance that we will meet all of the identification process requirements within the stated amount of time. Additionally, we will ensure that we will provide appropriate service, which in many cases includes an integrated co-teaching model. And in some, for some of our new entrants, children who are newly to the country, or at an entering level of language proficiency, they receive additional standalone services. Additionally, we will provide parent communication in their preferred language, as well as an orientation for new entrants and their parents so they understand our schools and our E&L program. Dr. Bossert, please proceed to the next slide. A very important element of our English language program is to ensure that our staff is properly trained in best practices. So we will continue to provide professional development for our teachers, both our E&L teachers, as well as those teachers in co-teaching settings. So these slides speak to all of those requirements, and I'm confident that we will continue to meet these requirements or match the needs of every student. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fine, and we appreciate your attention to this specific area of our plan. And please know, if you're a parent of a student who receives E&L services, we are very much aware of some of the unique challenges that are faced in a bilingual household, and we will make sure to accommodate those needs. I think we went through this in our previous discussion about the schedule and accommodation. So I will go very quickly because I know there are questions that we want to hear answers for, and I appreciate the 460 some odd of you are hanging in with us as we cross the 2-hour barrier. Attendance will be required. It is mandatory. Attendance in the virtual environment is the same as attendance in a in-person environment. We have the same code of conduct and expectations when students are attending from home as if they are attending school. We will have a specific list of expectations that speaks to being part of a virtual environment that I spoke about earlier. And teachers will be taking attendance 5 days a week for every student. Speaking about technology and connectivity, this is an area where Elwood really excels. The fact that we have the resources in place, the bandwidth in place, and the training in place to make this all happen is extraordinary. Mr. Tranchino, our Executive Director of Technology and Transportation, this is the area he prefers to focus on. But before he speaks of the slides, I want to give credit where it is due to both our administrative team for really leading the way and setting a positive example for our instructional staff to follow, but also Ms. Krista Albrecht, who serves as our teacher for helping other teachers to incorporate technology, our technology integration specialist, who helps the teachers to learn all of the new platforms and turnkey that to their students. So Mr. Tranchino, would you like to take us quickly through the next few slides?
Certainly, just a few bullets here, important bullets. We are fortunate at Elwood that we have a grade 6 through 12 one-to-one Chromebook initiative in place as we completed that last September. However, now it's our goal is equity and access. So we are looking to complete a K through 12. That would be Chromebooks for our K to 5 students and a true one-to-one environment for them as well. And as for access, very important, we've conducted the survey and it shows that we do have some families that have internet access challenges, and we will work with them to provide solutions for them to provide them and get them solutions for sufficient access for online learning in whatever form it takes. So that is the technology and connectivity quick update. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tranchino. And if you were curious about the response rate of that survey, 99% of our families reported having consistent access to the internet. So we were very happy to learn that. And we do know that there are devices available in 100% of our households, and we strive to make that consistent with the use of Chromebooks as soon as the remainder of our shipment comes in. As you might imagine, many districts looking for Chromebooks now. So the delivery date for the last few hundred that we need to complete our K-12 implementation might take us into October, but we're happy to know that at least every household has a device in which to connect to us with. And thank you, Mr. Tranchino, for making that happen. It was really a wonderful redeployment of district resources to make that happen in the spring and to help it move forward in the fall. So I thank you very much for your commitment to that project.
And thanks for the support of the whole team to make that happen, Dr. Bossert. Thank you.
Teacher and principal evaluation was really internally of something required for the plan, but this speaks to the fact that the way we observe and evaluate teachers and our principals in a brick and mortar setting will take place in the virtual environment as well. We do not stop evaluating our teachers and our staff because we are in a hybrid model or because we're in a distance learning model. So assurances have been given to the state that the same way we evaluate people in the buildings, we will continue to evaluate our staff regardless of the setting. This again is deep into the plan, but required. You should be aware that the state has given us some flexibility in the curriculum areas our teachers can work within. Every teacher has a unique certification. We have secondary English teachers, we have K-12 physical educators, we have elementary educators, we have speech pathologists. There is not a teaching certification. The certification is specific to the area that teachers are teaching. Some of them have multiple certifications, but it is unique to what they have their degree in and the licensing they hold. The state has given some flexibility during COVID-19 that a teacher may teach up to 40% of their day outside of their area of certification. So every classroom will have a certified teacher, but there will be portions of some days with some students where the teacher teaching their class does not necessarily hold the licensure for that subject. We will try to limit that as much as possible, but it's flexibility to be aware of in the event that your third grader comes home and says that their physical education teacher was teaching them reading that day. We will try to keep those incidents to a minimum, but we are also prepared for a shortage of substitute teachers. We expect our teachers and our staff to remain home if they're exhibiting any symptoms or have any sort of illness. That said, we have substitute shortage in the county and in the state and in the nation on the best day. During COVID-19, we know we will have a tremendous teacher shortage and that we will need, additional substitutes in order to be able to make sure our students are appropriately instructed and supervised throughout the day. So we also have additional flexibility within our substitutes to have them work outside of their certification. Believe it or not, we have reached the end of our slides. I'm going to ask whoever is not muted to please mute. But we have a number, don't recognize. Not sure what just happened there, but I think we've corrected it. So we have a number of questions that were submitted via the new email address to Mrs. Marks, who's checking. And Mrs. Marks has simply received a large volume of questions. So what we have done is asked her to summarize some together, group those that were similar in nature. She has kind of crossed out some that were answered within the presentation. But if you don't hear your specific question answered within this forum tonight, please know that we're going to use all of the questions that were submitted this evening. And again, any further questions that come to me, come to a member of the team, are coming through that email address to create an FAQ document that we will circulate as soon as it is completed. So that all of that said, Mrs. Marks, are there questions that the community has that we can answer this evening?
Yes, Dr. Bossert. There are probably more than 70 individual people that emailed with questions. I tried to summarize the best I could, and we'll start with probably the most common question that came through tonight. What is the district's plan to offer morning and afternoon care? Also, will there be childcare for parents who can't take off 3 days a week? Will rooms be sanitized after school, but before aftercare students are placed in these classrooms?
Okay, and thank you. And really, I should have known that question would be asked because I've been asked by several parents on an individual basis. We will continue our partnership with Elwood Care. I met with the president of the board and the director just last week to talk about what accommodations they would need and how we can partner with Elwood Care to make sure that Harley Care and Boyd Care remain in place in September. And they have some of the same accommodations that they must make for COVID-19 that we have as a school district, and some that are even more restrictive. They also, to work in our buildings, must comply with the same regulations we have. So things like temperature checks and mask wearing and appropriate social distancing will occur within the Boyd and Harley Care environments as they do now. We will give them space in our buildings. At Boyd, I think it is consistent with the space that we've always given them. And I think there might be some shifting of the space that we give them at Harley, but they will have space. The only thing I can tell you that came out of that meeting is it became clear that they will not be able to have the same enrollment that they've had in the past. They're going to have to reduce the number of students they can admit into the program so that they can maintain appropriate social distancing and follow all the guidelines that they are subjected to by the state of New York through the Child Care Council. So there will be a program, and I would communicate, please communicate directly with Erica, the director, to make sure that your child has secured a space if you haven't done so already. I know she will be cutting off enrollment. And as far as offering other child care options to working parents, I'm afraid we cannot. I'm afraid we cannot. That is the partnership we have in place. That is all that we can put into place. This is one of the reasons why when we looked at survey responses, that initial survey that had 600 and some odd narrative comments, I heard childcare over and over again. That's one of the reasons why we are attempting to have 100% of our elementary students in every day. Although some parents may be hesitant if they need to work, have middle school or even high school students home without supervision, we know that elementary parents certainly cannot have their children at home without supervision. So that's one of the reasons why we prioritize bringing 100% of our elementary students back. but the district cannot provide childcare on the off days of instruction. If we could, we'd bring the students in for instruction. That is the most meaningful care that we can provide to the children. But our partnership with Elwood Care remains in place. So please communicate directly with their leadership team about the details of enrolling your children. Oh, and cleanliness for that environment and sanitization of that environment will be consistent with the same protocols we have in place for the instructional day.
Okay, moving on to lots and lots of questions about deep cleaning. What are the plans to hire additional custodians? What will the deep cleaning, when will the deep cleaning take place for elementary schools? What will be a typical cleaning routine? Why aren't schools being deep cleaned after school?
There will be a cleaning throughout the day. As I mentioned earlier, our custodians will be perpetual motion throughout the buildings throughout the day. As I mentioned earlier, an unfortunate silver lining of our custodial availability is that we don't have outside activities coming in. We don't have athletics right now. We don't have a lot of the co-curricular. So it makes the availability of evening custodians much more focused on cleaning. Cleaning will take place every night. Cleaning will take place as the students depart and throughout the day. The deep cleaning means that we're using some chemical disinfectants that need time to sit and do their job that we wouldn't use on a daily basis, nor are they intended to be used on a daily basis. That electrostatic machine that Ms. Dunkel mentioned, that sprayer machine, will be used on the deep cleaning days, but it's not something that we would use on a regular daily or hourly basis. It's not intended to be used that way. The weekend deep cleaning, the deep cleaning for the elementary schools will take place on the weekends. And please don't confuse deep cleaning, meaning that there is no cleaning on the other days. There will be very thorough cleaning taking place after school hours every day, in addition to the cleaning that's taking place during the school day. Deep cleaning simply means they're able to focus more time, more attention, and use alternative products that they don't use when the students are around. That will happen on Wednesdays to separate the 8 cohorts at the secondary level, and on the weekends. Do we have intentions of hiring additional custodials? We have 3 vacancies we are filling right now. We know and expect that there will be overtime for many members of the team when we expand our weekend hours. Right now, from an economic standpoint, allowing for overtime amongst our existing crew is more economically feasible than hiring additional members. But if you have anyone who is interested in a position in the custodial department, we currently are filling 3 vacancies within the Elwood School District.
Okay, the next question. Will teachers want the same school supplies that they have previously requested? Is this different for elementary versus secondary? Will each student have their own supplies for themselves?
The second part of that question is the easiest one to answer. We will not have any communal supplies. One of the recommendations on a prior slide spoke to the fact that we can't share buckets of colored pencils, bucket of markers, shared glue sticks, things like that at the primary level. Each student will have to have their own individual supplies. That's not to say if your child comes to school without a pen or a pencil, one won't be provided, but we will focus on each student using their own materials and supplies. What the teachers will ask for will likely vary. It'll likely vary. I'm sure there'll be some changes within each setting to meet each teacher's individual needs. And we will ask them, and I know the elementary principals are listening very carefully right now, to post those materials and supplies as soon as possible. We know that it makes parents and students comfortable to have those items in hand. So any variation to the typical supply list, we will ask teachers to post as soon as possible at the building level. Thank you.
Can students be moved to the opposite cohort to accommodate childcare and transportation needs?
That's going to be very difficult to accommodate. The way that we designed the cohort was to try to create balance. And I mentioned that once the cohort was created, we were very specific to not separate siblings or households. So there would have to be an equitable distribution. And I'm going to say that we will hold pretty firm to A to K to L to Z unless we are presented with a very unique circumstance to cause us to revisit it. I'm not sure that we could use availability of childcare as that reason, because I have a sense that that would come up frequently from many, many households, and then we wouldn't be able to accommodate that request from the volume of folks that may make it. However, if you feel you have a unique circumstance, such as you have children within your household with different last names because you are raising a first cousin or have adopted a child with a different last name, please let us know. I'm sure there are some individual circumstances that we are not aware of that may divide a household. If you have a circumstance like that, please reach out directly to your child's principal to speak of it. But the availability of childcare would not be a reason to cause us to make a cohort shift, because I'm afraid we would receive a tidal wave of that request. Mrs. Marks.
If there is a change to the school calendar, can this be decided before the August 27th board meeting to allow parents to make changes to their schedules? And also, will a later school start date mean a later end to the school date in July, or will you be taking away our vacation days?
I'll answer the first part. I will communicate with the Board of Education in advance of the August 27th meeting. So that I cannot vote outside of a public meeting. I can have a sense of each board member's position on the issue. So each board member is listening right now. So I can ask right now, board members, please communicate with me sometime before the end of the week if you have any opposition to the adjustment in the calendar that I've proposed, so that I can communicate effectively with the community. The community is aware that sometimes communication goes out that makes an announcement and says pending board approval. If I put out an announcement that says pending board approval, it means that I feel I've had enough communication with each individual member of the board to have a sense that the board as a unit will be prepared to approve something. I think this is one of those circumstances because we've had some initial conversation with the board about this justification. So I will have a better sense of the board and to be able to speak in definitive terms about the calendar. I know that is essential information. What was the second half of that question, Mrs. Fox? Oh, taking away vacation time. The way that I've proposed adjusting the calendar would require us, since we're moving 2 days of teacher conferences from before Labor Day to after Labor Day, we would have to identify 2 days that were scheduled to be vacation days to become instructional. The 3 candidates for that change that I'll propose to the Board of Education, and Mrs. Marks was very helpful in reviewing the calendar with me earlier today, would be the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, the Friday before Memorial Day, and the Monday after Easter Sunday. So those would be the most natural changes to make to the school calendar that I will discuss with the Board of Education. But again, the superintendent recommends the calendar, the Board of Education adopts it.
Lots of questions about orchestra, band, and chorus. Will there be orchestra, band, and chorus? And how do they? How is that going to work with masking?
Yes, we have to make major accommodations for our large group instruction. Orchestra, band, and chorus will not meet in the traditional sense in the large groups that they typically do. Students playing an instrument and singing are referred to within the guidance and by the medical community as super spreaders. When you are speaking in normal tones, appropriate social distancing is 6 feet. When you are playing an instrument or projecting your voice in song, you become a super spreader, and that requires 12 feet of appropriate social distancing. So clearly we will need to make accommodations for smaller groups to come together to focus on music and to continue their instruction with settings that are safe for the students. So will instrumental music and choral instruction continue? Absolutely. Will it be in the traditional sense using large group performances? It will not.
Other Suffolk County schools have in-person instruction grades 6 to 8. How can you assure me that my children will fall behind?
Well, one of the advantages that we have is that the Elwood model for delivering the virtual instruction gives every student a bird's eye view into what's happening in the classroom on a daily basis. The virtual instruction that we have in place has the students participating in the classroom from a remote location 4 days a week, and then everyone together in the distance model 5 days a week. So look very carefully. I know that it will be everyone's tendency to compare plans, but what I think is really advantageous about our plans is that the students are actively engaged K to 12, 5 days a week with their teachers. There is no off day for instruction, and there is no lack of direct instruction on any day of the week. 4 days a week at the secondary level, the students are either present in the physical classroom or participating in the physical classroom with their teacher. That fifth day, that Wednesday, I think parents and students should look forward to some very creative uses of our new technology and resources to engage students in the home environment and take advantage of some of that creativity that our students and faculty have gained through our closure. Every district will be a bit different, but I am confident that our students will be poised to be at the head of the class.
Okay, next question. What do the pediatricians say about the health impact due to 3 days of screen time weekly?
Yeah, I have to tell you, when we did our discussions 2 years ago about iGen, and we did a shared community read, and we talked about the dangers of screen time, we were really focusing on things like social media and gaming and some video addictions like TikTok and those types of platforms. When we're referring to screen time, we really weren't talking about the instructional process that takes place within the Google Classroom, within a Zoom environment for instructional purposes. We have great concerns about students staring at a screen all day. We're very hopeful that during the downtime of instruction, our students are engaging in outdoor activities, our students are engaging in athletics in any form possible, our students are engaged in healthy, creative, artistic, musical initiatives. Because our instructional program requires such an excessive amount of screen time right now, we really hope that means screen time in areas outside of school have been greatly reduced. The last thing we want is students to be focused on their Chromebooks from 8 to 3 and then playing Fortnite from 4 to 8. We can't have that. We need to develop a healthy balance. And I can tell you, this is a COVID-19 accommodation. I would much rather be standing at the front of the auditorium with you all seated with me, talking about our plans for September, talking about creative practices for curriculum development. That's not where we are right now. This is a necessary evil in order for instruction to move forward. To unplug from the computers would be to disconnect from instruction right now. So while it is something we hope can dissipate moving forward, we know it is a necessary resource at the present time.
Okay, next question. Are school routers being upgraded? The kids say the buildings do not have strong Wi-Fi. Can we get an idea of what level of connectivity homes with multiple kids will need? Could the IT department put out a list of what each home should have?
In our capacity survey, again, we learned that 99% of our families felt they had reliable internet service in their household. For that 1% that reported otherwise, yes, please work with our IT department to see if there are things that can be done, should be done, will be done in order to improve home connectivity. And again, we also want students working on similar devices, which is why we have shifted our one-to-one Chromebook initiative K-12. We want students to be learning in a similar platform. Further, one of the recommendations of the technology committee had been to upgrade the types of Chromebooks we are providing to have touch screens, because our teachers reported how advantageous that would be. So part of our order of supplemental Chromebooks is a full grade level of those with touch screens. And as we move forward in our Chromebook replacement, we will do that. As far as the connectivity, Mr. Tranchino spoke to that. Wi-Fi might be spotty for students trying to log in on their personal devices from the school. But as far as their use of Chromebooks and our teachers' ability to project their lessons through live streaming, we know we have more than adequate bandwidth in order for that to occur. There are dead zones in part of the building where students try to access the Wi-Fi from their handheld devices. That's purposeful. But within our classrooms and in the instructional areas, we feel we have reliable service in every classroom in the district.
Okay, will the use of lockers be allowed in middle and high school? And will the number of visitors to the bathrooms be monitored K-12?
Yes, bathrooms will be monitored. The number of students that can go in at any one time will be closely monitored, and the bathrooms will be cleaned frequently throughout the day. The use of lockers will be extremely limited. I know that Dr. Sapienza and Mrs. Brzezinski are finalizing their plans for lockers. I don't want to announce them because I think there's some finalization that they want to do regarding whether lockers will be accessed beginning, end of day, or not at all. So we want to talk about that. But students visiting lockers between periods at either building certainly will not be occurring. It simply can't. They are too close together. And we also want to limit the amount of material students are bringing into the building as potential contaminants. So locker use will be very different, K-12, because we have lockers at Boyd as well. But I'm going to leave to the principals to give specific guidance regarding lockers within their buildings.
We've had lots and lots of questions about why are sixth graders on the secondary reopening model.
Right now, the guidance regarding, I'm not looking at the district as K-6 being elementary. I'm looking at our elementary buildings and our secondary buildings. The middle school is definitively a secondary building, although I know by definition, sixth grade can be considered an elementary grade for sure. The research really helped to guide that decision. The research that I noted earlier as most current talks about children under 10. So fifth grade is already on the fringe of that. Sixth grade is certainly on the other side. So it's more about the size of the student, the size of the furniture that they're using, and our ability to put the correct number of students in the classroom. And our sixth grade just doesn't meet that same requirement. And the way we have our departmentalized structure at the secondary level in the middle school and high school, inclusive of sixth grade, doesn't give that one class together cohort the same way that we have K-5. So we really, for the purposes of this planning, needed to consider sixth grade as part of our secondary platform.
Okay. What is the logic behind splitting the kids by alphabet? Wouldn't it make more sense to split them up by team? And also, how will the teams and the EMS be balanced among the cohorts? How will teaming work within the cohort mode?
I'm going to let Dr. Sapienza speak to all of those questions and her guidance that goes home to parents, because I know that she has plans in mind for teaming and making sure things are balanced within the cohort model. The logic between splitting by alphabet was something I mentioned earlier. We can't risk splitting siblings, and the only way to ensure that is to make sure there was a uniform alphabetical split K-12. We have families that have children represented in all 4 buildings. We have families with children in multiple buildings. We have families in Elwood who send as many as 9 students to the Elwood School District. So to risk putting those families on different schedules was something we couldn't do. And we have to make sure that once we are aware of all the students who will be opting for home instruction, to rebalance class placement. So there is a lot of work ahead of us in August after we have definitive information about parents who intend to opt for home instruction rather than sending their students to class. Theoretically, when we put our 3rd grade together, when we have 22 children per classroom, we can learn that one classroom, 10 children have opted for home assignment, while in another classroom, 0. Well, clearly we're not going to leave 22 in one class and 12 in the other. So restructuring our classroom placements is something we know we have ahead of us throughout the month of August to make sure that there's a balance. So the alphabetical split was a necessary decision to make as a base.
If infection rates stay low, when do you determine when kids go back to 5 days a week? Or since we adopted a COVID plan, does it have to stay that way for the whole year?
No, definitely not. And that's something I had hoped I'd emphasize throughout the plan, that our plan is fluid, the plan will be revised, our plan will be adapted based upon conditions taking place within our region and advisement we get from the New York State Department of Health, from the New York State Education Department, and our local Department of Health. The answer is whenever it is determined that the infection rate has not spiked due to the population that we have brought in, and we will look very carefully, specifically at Elwood. When we feel that we have practices in place to maintain the safety of our students and that adding additional students to the model can be done without compromising that health and safety, we will endeavor to bring back 100% of our kids 100% of the time. I have fears that we may also need to be prepared to rewind to bring in fewer students in order to maintain their safety and welfare. Therefore, the plan is designed to go either way, opening the valve or closing the valve. And I hate stealing the governor's language, but that is the model we have in mind.
When will we be given the information regarding staggered arrival times?
I think it's in the slides that speaks to the letters of the alphabet and what time they should arrive at each building. So if you review the slides that we presented tonight, it's included in that. And I also assure you that the communication that you receive home from each building principal will include arrival and dismissal procedures as well.
Will we be getting any kind of guidelines under what kind of mask is acceptable? For example, would some sort of gaiter be acceptable, or would it be a single layer mask, a double layer mask? What would be acceptable?
I think that part of the guidance that we are working with the American Academy of Pediatrics is some mask guidance. And in addition to creating a video that helps to speak about building mask endurance, there'll be some guidelines included in that about appropriate mask wearing. It's unfortunate how many individuals we see wearing their mask below their nostrils, which is not in accordance with medical guidelines. So that we can include as part of that guidance into the type of masks that are most advisable. The gaiters might be recommended for some of our younger students because they can't fall off. You know, when it's on their neck and they're pulling it above their mouth and nose, that might work best for some of our students. What I would suggest is parents working with their children during the month of August to decide which one is most comfortable for them and the one that they feel they can wear comfortably for the greatest period of time. Keeping in mind that building mask endurance will be aligned with what goals we're trying to accomplish when they're seated in the classroom in September.
If my son does 100% remote learning in the beginning, will he be able to switch to the hybrid model later on in the school year?
Yes. Parents, if you opt for a home assignment, it doesn't mean you're opting to remain in that placement throughout the year. I'm glad that a parent thought to ask that question. I'm sorry I didn't reference that earlier. The decision you make to start the year can be modified during the year. If you elect to start the year in the building and there is a condition that changes that wants you to shift a home assignment, you can do that. And the other way, obviously, as well. If you begin at home and you want to be added to the live instruction, you can be. We will make sure that the rosters we put together are fluid enough to entertain students entering and exiting smoothly. At the secondary level, they're engaged with the class, whether they're in the building or at home watching. So being fluid in and out of that is an ease of transition. A little more difficult at the elementary level because we have to assign teachers to work in the environment when our students are in 100%. But again, we will make the necessary accommodations, particularly for students who have a medical need. How many more questions do you think we have, Mrs. Marks? Just out of curiosity.
Quite a number. We're going to try to get through it. If a person scans a high temp, will they be rescanned before being sent to the isolation room? Having seen false positive temperature scans, especially when one has a mask on for a length of time.
The first screening will take place as students enter the building. The second screening will take place in the isolation room because we understand that sometimes when seated in a bus or seated in a car or waiting outside in the summer, we could get a false positive temperature reading. So we'll allow a child to sit for a bit before their recheck in the isolation room. Yes, there will be a second reading before a parent is called to pick up the child.
Will students and staff be periodically tested for COVID in order to mitigate the virus?
Right now, the state not only does not require COVID-19 testing, it advises against it. And there was an interesting statement made by the governor in today's press conference where he alluded to the fact that districts may want to consider it. Right now, it's prohibited to require it. So I will watch that guidance carefully. But right now, as we've learned from the medical community is very guarded with the testing. They really don't want testing kits being used and labs being busy testing kits of asymptomatic people. Apparently, there is still not ample supply of tests to test the general population on a regular basis, nor are there enough labs available to give us the results of this testing. So the medical community, I've heard loud and clear, say, please only send individuals for testing if they're demonstrating symptoms or fear they have risked exposure to COVID-19. To test 2,200 asymptomatic individuals to return to school would be against the guidance that we've received from the medical community. Doesn't mean the governor won't change his mind somewhere down the line.
Will the curriculum and expectations be readjusted to consider the inevitable regression that many students face?
Yes, we have to make sure that we are constantly assessing our students. We have plans in place, as we discussed earlier, for fall assessments to make sure that we are teaching the students at their level. We know that not every student advanced at the same pace they would have under typical circumstances in the spring. It was not a typical circumstance. So that we will continue to provide remediation and support as necessary for our students, as we would in any setting.
Am I able to opt out of buses for the morning, but not for the afternoon?
I don't see why not. We need to make sure that all our students are getting safely to and from school. So while it is very helpful to reduce the capacity on buses, we also understand that there are families who rely upon the transportation. So if the opting out of transportation can only take place for one run, just please make sure that is very clearly communicated to our transportation department when the questionnaire is delivered.
Okay, what are the plans for Meet the Teacher Night?
It is likely that we will have to conduct our Meet the Teacher Night in a virtual environment. I think that our teachers will be very accustomed to hosting virtual meetings using our Google Meet. And I'm guessing that unless there are grand changes between now and then, Meet the Teacher Night will also take place in a virtual capacity. We are trying to limit the amount of individuals that come into the building to just our students and otherwise very essential. Doing our Meet the Teacher Night in a virtual capacity is in the best interest of everyone's health and safety. Again, adults spread the virus at a much greater rate than children.
Will children be able to bike to school? Are there enough spots to lock their bikes up?
That is not a question I've been asked before. That is a new one. We would encourage students to ride their bikes to school if parents feel they can safely do that. I will have to speak to Mr. McDonald and our building leaders about making sure there is sufficient space for locking bicycles. So please remind me of that question on your notepad tomorrow so I can follow up.
Okay. Do you anticipate that many of the secondary teachers will be teaching remotely from their homes? Will students sit in classrooms 2 days a week watching their instructor on their Chromebooks or smartboard?
Teachers will have the ability to teach remotely. And one of the things that was important to them from an instructional design capacity is to be able to share their screen. And that's something that's easily achieved within the Google Meet. So they can do, and I really should change some things around a little bit. So they can do what I've done this evening and share the screen and use a presentation in order to be able to instruct the students properly. When the teachers are at home, there are, unique challenges that arise that don't exist when they're broadcasting from the classroom. So if the teacher's teaching from the home environment, they may want to create different experiences like the virtual background I'm using now, and using share the screen and Google Classroom in order to make it the most comfortable setting for both students and teachers. But on that Wednesday, all secondary instruction will be taking place when the teachers are present in their homes. Synchronous learning will continue whether the teachers are in their classroom or teaching from home. We also have some unique circumstances where teachers have been assigned because of a medical condition or other condition to teach from home, where there might be a teacher assistant or paraprofessional with the students physically in the classroom while the teacher is teaching them remotely, projected into the classroom. Again, no ideas are off the table. We need to make sure students are provided with the correct level of instruction.
Okay. How will all the students safely navigate the halls between periods in the middle and high school?
Again, and I think I mentioned that earlier, please do not have a mental image of the bell ringing and everyone flooding the hallway. Our hallways will feature one-way traffic, will feature students respecting social distancing, and will have staggered departures from the classrooms. I don't want to speak in specific terms because, to be candid, these principals are still working with their teams to figure out the logistics of everyone getting from A to B without doing it at that time. But I can tell you there will definitively be staggered bell departures in order to decrease volume within the hallways at the secondary level. And again, particularly at the middle school, when we can keep the students in the same classroom and move the adults, we will be doing that.
Do parents need to park cars and bring children to the door to have their temperature taken, or will parents drop off and wait in their car for temperature results prior to driving away?
I'm not sure that that will be feasible or possible. There will be times where a parent drops off a child, the child gets the temperature check, it registers a fever, the child is sent to the isolation room, there's a fever read again, and the parent will be called to pick up the child. I can imagine a circumstance where that will occur, where a parent will be doing a loop from the school, home, back to the school. It's an unfortunate reality. If we asked every car to wait while the temperature check was being completed, our arrival procedure would take a much larger portion of the day. So we will count on the fact that parents are being very careful about monitoring their children's temperature before leaving the day. So the number of students that arrive registering a temperature is extremely limited.
The high school does not take BOCES into account. Is this off the table?
The high school does take BOCES into account. Ms. Kelly Gorman mentioned students attending the Wilson Tech program, for instance, which is a BOCES program. And as she mentioned, if BOCES opens that instruction 5 days a week, we will transport children there 5 days a week. Students with placements outside of our district will go to those programs in accordance with those schedules. In some capacities, we are hearing that students will receive a greater amount of live instruction. And in other programs, we're hearing they will not be receiving any live instruction. But any student with a placement outside of one of our 4 buildings will attend it based upon that program's prescribed schedule.
Will the sensory room at Harley be up and running? If so, when and how will it be sanitized? And also, will playgrounds be used at recess?
The playground will be used, but there's some playground equipment that will not be able to use. Things like the large climbing toys and slides can't be sanitized frequently enough to allow for the number of students who might use them, but open play areas for certain will be made available for students, and games that lend themselves to social distancing certainly will be encouraged. The first part of that question was, Mrs. Marks, if you could please repeat the first part of the question.
Sensory room.
Sensory room. Thank you, Mrs. Milan.
Yes, thank you.
No, rooms like the sensory room will have to be used in special circumstances with individual children only, because some of the furniture and equipment that is present in the sensory room and the maker spaces is much more difficult to sanitize than the equipment in a regular classroom. And again, the students traveling between areas of the building, we're trying to reduce to all extent possible. So while we may use some of those larger spaces for mask breaks and bringing small groups and things like that, the traditional use of those rooms will absolutely be modified.
About siblings, if one child has a fever, they should be kept home, assuming there's not a COVID exposure. It should be fine for the other children in the household to attend school. Is this correct?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question, please, Mrs. Marks? I'm not sure.
This is about siblings in one household. If one child has a fever, they should be kept home, assuming there's not a COVID exposure. Should it be okay for the other children in the household to attend school?
If there are any COVID-like symptoms, we would ask parents to keep all of the children home. If a child is running a temperature because they have a stomach virus or an earache, I don't think it's necessary to keep the siblings home from school if they have not shown any symptoms and they are not running a fever. Mrs. Marks, before you ask the next question, I'm going to point out that it's 10 minutes to 10. I know that this is difficult for everyone who's been sticking with us, and there are hundreds of you still with us. So I think we'll ask as many questions as we can, but at 10 o'clock, we will answer the remaining questions within the FAQ document. So if you could, I know you've been prioritizing the questions that were asked the most frequently. If you could pose them to me in that capacity over the next 10 minutes, we'll call 10 o'clock our hard stop.
I think we've pretty much covered everything, Dr. Bosser. I think we have. I may have missed a couple of things. I apologize to anybody I did, but I think we've covered, I think it was over 75 emails. So
well, that's really terrific. Mrs. Marks, I know you were working feverishly behind the scenes to compile those questions and to try to group them, and I truly appreciate your efforts. And I thank you. I'm hearing the winds kick up outside. I'm seeing the rain has started to fall in my little neck of the world. And I'm hopeful that the forecast for tomorrow isn't the wild winds and heavy rains and coastal flooding that we expect, because that presents an all new challenge during this COVID-19 period of time. I really, once again, want to thank everyone who participated in the creation of this plan, all of our administrators that were present on the screen tonight, and all of those that participated behind the scenes, helping to put the plan together. We had so many members contribute to the task force. We had so many parents and community members who weren't part of the task force, but took the time to share articles, share ideas, share what they had heard in whatever resources they found with members of the leadership team. And we found all of that input helpful and productive, and hopefully resulted in a plan that you feel confident about and comfortable with having your students participate in. That said, we know it's not a perfect plan. There is no perfect plan during COVID-19. The things that we are time-honored in favor of are just not possible right now. And we know that not having 100% of our students in 100% of the portions of our building 100% of the time is not what we have right now, and it's what we want. So until we can get back to pre-March 13th, we will not be exactly where we want to be. But we are doing our very best to ensure the health and safety of all of our students, our faculty, our staff, and making sure we have a program of excellence that will help our students to continue to achieve and, again, be at the head of the class. We know that every district has released a plan or will release the plan. We know that there will be elements of other plans that parents may find favorable. I am certain that there will be parents who view the Elwood plan and find our plan to be favorable. I also know that when we cherry pick certain items from certain plans and compare it that way, it's very difficult to check every box for every family. Just through some of the questions, I can tell where some concerns are, and I can tell some areas of the plan that we will need to review as we progress during the year. But remember, the goal is to return to normalcy at a safe and healthy way. We're fortunate that we have a number of members of the medical community who participated in our reopening planning. One of the things that helps me to sleep soundly and also helps me to sign all of those assurances as required by the state of New York is that the members of the medical community who had input into our plan find it to be safe in accordance with current guidelines, current research, current best practices. And I know there's a lot of sacrifices that need to be made to get us there. I know that wearing a mask for the duration of period of time throughout an instructional day is a challenge. We will be very cognizant of that and make sure that breaks are incorporated into our day and that the age of students are kept square in mind with our requirements. But it's a necessary component of the plan. We have to keep students and staff members safe. Okay, as we approach the 3-hour mark, please know and share with your neighbors and friends that we have recorded this entire broadcast. All of the slides, in addition to the 52-page document, will be available on our newly formatted website tomorrow. Please feel free to peruse it at your leisure. Ask any additional questions you may not have had the chance to ask this evening through that website, the reopening at elwood.k12.ny.us. And we will be creating a frequently asked questions document and making sure that's circulated through the public as well. And again, when I receive the FAQ from the Department of Health, which talks about those scenarios and our emergency response to the county regarding infections, regarding exposures, I will circulate that as well. So please keep the lines of communication open, check our website frequently. And I thank you so much for hanging with us for all 3 hours of what I hope you have found to be an informative presentation. As I hear the winds kicking up, I hope everyone is safe tomorrow. Please secure everything you have outside, prepare for some wicked weather, remain safe, remain healthy, and we really look forward to seeing you again soon. And with that, we will